Yo, what's up guys, it's Talon. So today I'm going to be making an entire video just going over a presentation about all of the fundamentals of Wild Rift. Basically everything that I think you actually need to know to get better. I genuinely think you watch this singular video, probably will be a relatively long video, maybe over an hour, maybe multiple hours. I think if you watch this and you understand everything in this video that you really can climb quite high. And so I'm going to just start going into the video. First off, why you should listen to me. Why my opinion matters. I've hit Sovereign 4 times, probably will hit it a 5th time this season, unless I somehow tilt really, really hard, which is possible, I've hit 5 role Challenger before Sovereign existed, so I got Challenger on every single role. On 4 separate accounts, one account, I got support as well as ADC, then every other account I got Challenger a different role, before Sovereign was a thing. I've been top 10 on the server 3 times, all playing autofill, and all of these 3 times were the last 3 seasons. Not this season. This season I think the highest I've been is about top 100 or top 50-ish, but the other 3 seasons top 10, all autofill, so I've played everything. And I have no life and I have very little friends, so obviously I have a lot of time to play the game, so clearly I would probably understand it pretty well. So these are the topics. I'm not really going to go super deep into talking about them right now. We'll go into each topic specifically. But yeah, I'm going to have timestamps as well for the stuff. So if you have, based on these topics, you have a certain thing that you're interested in, there will be timestamps, unless I forget, because I am lazy. I might have no life, but I spend most of that life playing Wild Rift. I don't really spend it editing YouTube videos, so I might forget to, but it doesn't matter. Either way, going right into the first thing, we're just going to describe each role, how it works, how to play each role, essentially the most important things to understand. Even if you don't play this specific role, it's important to understand the goal of the role, the types of champions in the role, all these types of things. So I do recommend still learning all of these different parts, basically, of Wild Rift. So we're going to go right into the champions first. Types of champions in Baron lane. There's generally, you could classify it into more things if you wanted, but for me, split pushers, bruisers, tanks, and then carry/range champions. And I'm going to go, as deep as I want on this slide. So I'm not going to try to limit myself in terms of time. I'm just going to make it a long video. So just pointing that out as well. The first thing is the goal of split pushers, generally speaking. So first off, split pushers are usually going to be like Jax, Camille, Fiora, these types of champions who are really strong on the side lane, really good at pushing turrets, and usually really good in 1v1s. So their main goal is to just draw pressure on the side lane. Oftentimes they draw this pressure on the side lane by having the lane more pushed forward, so that if the enemy jungle ganks them, they won't lose as much because the wave will be more towards the enemy turret, so the enemy can't push the turret as quick after killing them. These champions also have a lot of escapes, so Fiora, has her second ability, her dash. Camille has her third ability, her ultimate. Jax has his third ability, his his dash, everything, right? So a lot of these champions, they have really, really good ways to escape, which means that not only can they escape even if they're playing really aggressive as they get ganked, but they can also win these 1v1 and these 1v2 scenarios really well, because usually they have really good single target burst damage on their champions. They're usually really good in the tanks. For example, Fiora and Camille, again, they have true damage. And so usually these split pushers, they're going to do really, really well in the 1v1 on side lane against tanks, against these, weaker 1v1 champions, more team fighting based champions. So that's kind of something to keep in mind as well. And then their main goal with split pushing is to split push on the opposite side of the objective. So this is by far the most important thing to understand about any Baron laner, but especially a split pusher. When you are going on the side lane, you want to be on the opposite side of the objective. So if the next objective spawning is a Baron, then you want to be on the dragon side. If the next one's a dragon, you want to be on the Baron side. The reason for this is because your goal is to draw people away from the main objectives, because you're not a good team fighting champion, you're more of a side laner, you can draw someone into a 1v1 or a 1v2, which is what you do well, instead of having to go to a team fight at an objective. And then if you do die on the side lane or you get caught, it's perfectly fine if you're on the opposite side of the objective, because then the enemy can't just go and get a Baron right after. But imagine you're on the Baron side of the map as the Baron is up, and then you die. Well, now the enemy go right to Baron immediately, and you're completely screwed. But if the jungle chases you on the opposite side of the map, then your team gets a free objective. And so your goal is, again, draw that pressure, create these 1v1s, these 1v2s, and then you have 2 options once you have this pressure on the opposite side. You can either stay on the side lane and keep looking for the side lane pressure, or you can find a way to rotate to a team fight first. So if you think that for whatever reason, you're not going to be very valuable in the team fight, or that you can potentially, get a lot more value on the side lane, then you're going to stay on the side lane and continue to keep pressure and draw people to you. But if you think that you being in that team fight will win the team fight, like maybe you think, oh, I'm Camille, I can Camille ult their carry, I can win the fight, then maybe after you push the lane, you rotate to the fight, and you get towards that fight first because the enemy are too busy clearing the waves that you push towards their turret. So that's really generally Split Pusher's goal. Now going into tanks. Tanks are really just trying to deny the enemy laner a lead. So you're not really going to play super aggro in lane. You're not going to play to 1v1. You're just playing to not let the enemy get more gold than you, essentially. To not let them break your turret. You're just essentially putting up a wall and not letting them pass through that wall. Then later on in the game, you're going to do the same thing in terms of opposite side of objective split pushing and drawing pressure on the side lane. But the difference is, as a tank, right after you push that side lane, you immediately are going to rotate. Whereas a split pusher might spend more time on the side lane, a tank just pushes the wave and roams. Push the wave when it comes back to a neutral point in your lane, then roam again, and just keep doing this on and on and on. Wave management is something we're going to talk about as a separate kind of whole thing. And so you're going to understand how you can utilize wave management to allow yourself to push first, to do all these different things. And so I'm going to talk about that more specifically later. But tanks really do need to manage their wave very, very well so that they can rotate first to objectives and so they don't get out roamed, so they don't get stuck on side lane, all these types of things. And then itemization is extremely important as well. Your itemization should generally be against two different types of things. So the first thing is your itemization needs to be good against the person you're laning against. So that means if you're laning against an AP champion, don't build plated steel caps right away, build mercury treads because you need that magic resistance. Or if you're against an AD champion, build the armor boots, right? And that type of thing. But then as you go later into the game and you become less focused on your 1v1, you need to start itemizing against the enemy carry. So maybe the enemy have a really fed Nyla and they have a really fed Tristana. Well, then you're going to need a Randu and Solomon. Or maybe they have a fed Vayne and they have a fed Jax. Well, then you need a Frozen Heart. Or, you know, they have a bunch of fed AP champions, then go for Kaenic Rockern or go for Force of Nature. So understanding these different itemization kind of keys to, you know, deny the enemy carry while still making sure that you can do well against the enemy laner that you're laning specifically against. After that, we have now bruisers, and I'm not really going to talk specifically about bruisers because bruisers are kind of just a hybrid of split pushers and tanks. And so you have to identify in the individual game whether you want to fulfill more of a split pushing role or whether you want to fulfill more of a tank role. So you could maybe still be that pressure on side 1v1 type of split pushing champion and essentially play like a Camille, even though you're maybe a Darius, let's say. The times that you would want to do this, play more like a split pusher, is when you know your 1v1 matchups very good, but maybe in the team fights you don't think you're very strong. So Darius into, say, an Ornn is going to do pretty well because Darius likes playing into tanks, and so he can side lane really, really well against an Ornn. But an Ornn can often get more team fight value than him, especially if the enemy, you know, the rest of the enemy team is maybe hard for Darius. So like, Darius struggles when champions can kite him. So maybe there's a Kai'Sa ADC who's really, really hard to catch. Maybe there is a Cleanse Syndra who we know we're not really going to be able to catch out. Maybe there's an Olaf who just, you know, will go right through us and kind of mess us up as well. So depending on the champions that you see, you have to understand whether you should team fight or split push basically as a bruiser. And then lastly, we have carry/range champions. So their goal is essentially just get gold as much as they possibly can, anywhere they can, wherever that gold is. They just want to get it. They want to get as much gold and then carry in the team fights later. So oftentimes this is going to be a range champion like Vayne, Jace, other stuff like that. Usually they're going to have really strong lane phases because they're often going to be a range top laner. And so again, making sure that you punish the enemy really hard when they walk up for last hits on minions, which we'll talk about more in the laning and wave management portion. But making sure you punish that to get a good health lead, and then building up a really, really big wave so you can dive with your jungle if your jungle's pathing towards you, but also keeping your wave in a more safe position if you know the enemy jungle's pathing towards you or your jungle's pathing away. Just generally getting those leads in lane because you do have the range advantage, you have kind of that early lead. And then again, carrying in the team fights, which means that you're going to have to push the wave about 30 seconds before an objective is spawning so that you can then rotate towards the objective and use your big gold lead to then carry a fight. And then the last thing to mention is that jungle tracking, it matters for all of these champions, but especially for ranged top laners because ranged top laners are really, really easy to gank. And so the main thing to understand is if your jungle is pathing away from you, so maybe you're on the top side of the map and your jungle starts on the top side, that means he's going to path away because he's going to go to the red side after. And so if he's doing that, then you probably want to be a bit safer with your wave management, keep the wave a bit more towards you, don't over push towards their turret. And then if your jungle's pathing towards you, well, then you can build up a really big wave, as we'll speak about in the wave management portion. And you will be chilling. You'll be able to really crash the wave, dive them, probably get a huge lead. So that's going to be it for the champions. Then we'll go into the next part of Baron lane after that. Okay, so now we're just going to talk about some of the key points of Baron lane as well. First thing is boots recall is very important. So if you crash the third wave that comes, basically crashing means putting the wave completely under the turret so that your minions are just under their turret. If you crash the third wave and you farm perfectly, you will have enough gold to get your boots. You will want to use the fact that you push the wave first to recall for your boots and then get towards the lane first, because now you're going to have a really, really big power spike on boots. And if the enemies stay and they don't get their boots, then you're just going to win every trade. And if the enemy do recall afterwards, then you're going to be on the wave first, and then you get control over the wave because the enemy recalled late because they were stuck clearing the wave that you put under their turret. So this is the biggest power spike in the early lane. Again, after crashing the third wave or maybe the fourth wave if you need to, you get those boots, and then you're just going to be completely in control of the lane after that. Split push opposite side of the objective. Again, we already talked about that. Find impact through pressure because it's an isolated lane. So what I mean by this point is that you're not really, like, it's harder to find impact in Baron lane than it is in jungle, than it is in mid lane, than it is in support, because those roles are connected with the rest of the map. But Baron lane is uniquely isolated from pretty much the rest of the map, and what you need to do, what you need to understand, is that because of this isolation, it doesn't matter if you're 5-0 if that 5-0 lead stays in your lane, because then, okay, I'm 5-0, maybe the kill I'm laning against is 0-5, but if the rest of my map is, let's say, my team has 15 kills, the enemy has 22 kills, then the enemy team is going to win the game because I'm just on a side lane. Even if I get the inhibitor tower, it doesn't matter if I'm not using my pressure at some point to impact the rest of the map. And so you have to find these unique scenarios where you push a wave early so that you can then rotate and help your team, or where you draw the enemy carry towards you on the side lane so your team can get a free objective, or where you literally purposefully die 10 seconds before a Baron because you know that your team's on the Baron side and the enemy jungle's nearby and you're just trying to buy time. So you really need to understand that your impact is not the same as other roles. If there is a 10-0 AD carry Vayne with a Lulu, they're going to pretty much always win the game. But if you're a 10-0 Fiora by yourself in the top lane, you're not always going to win the game if you don't understand this pressure kind of concept. And so really understanding that and understanding the value of a wave and gold is super, super important. After that, jungle tracking, again, we already kind of mentioned that. The jungle pathing towards you versus pathing away, how that's going to change your wave management. Again, we'll kind of mention it a little more as well in the wave management portion. Then punishing last hits is immensely important for trading in lane. Basically what this means, whenever the enemy minion is really, really low, you know that the enemy are going to walk up and try to get the last hit. When you know that they're going to walk up for the last hit, you use that fact to go trade with them, because then they have to choose between hitting you and hitting the minion. So either they lose that gold from hitting the minion, or they take a really bad trade because you get to auto attack them while they're auto attacking a minion. So understanding this will just be the fundamental way to have better trades. Something I forgot to mention as well, that I'll mention in the laning portion, is that level advantages are really crucial. So after 4 minions, and I'm just going to do this right now. We're going to add this in because, you know, again, as we're going through, we might as well. So level diffs, specifically, last minion of first wave gives level 2. And then I'll write sometimes third minion of first wave. So this is an important thing to mention, and so I will now have this in as well. So level diffs, the most important thing to understand is the last minion of the first wave that you kill will get you level 2. And so if you kill that wave really quick, you can trade really hard when you're level 2 and the enemy are level 1, because getting level 2 gives you an extra ability, it gives you more AP, it gives you more AD, it gives you more health, it gives you more armor, it gives you more magic resist. So you're literally stronger in every way, shape, and form. Sometimes it can be the third minion of the first wave if you've been fighting on that wave for a while, because obviously you get some XP as the game goes on, and so that's the case too. You can just look at the little bar of XP, basically the circle where your level kind of is, the more filled up that circle is, the closer you are to your next level. So that's an important thing to understand. And then lastly is Scorpion usage. So don't take the Scorpion if there's an equal wave and you're recalling, because the Scorpion's not going to last hit properly and you're going to lose out on a lot of gold. Don't take the Scorpion if you want to keep your freeze, because then it'll break your freeze, which again, we'll talk about freezing later in the wave management portion. The time that you want to use Scorpion is to build up a big wave. When you're building up a big wave, then you grab the Scorpion to crash a giant wave on their turret and really, really take their turret down. You grab the Scorpion if the enemy are freezing on you and you want to break that freeze, or you grab the Scorpion if you just simply want to buy some time so that you can take a recall. So that's an important thing to understand as well. Now we'll go in to the jungle. Really quick though, this is my Baron Lane guide. I'm going to link this presentation to you guys, and there's a full Baron Lane guide on my YouTube channel that you can watch just by clicking this link, which gives you basically this information, but in video form with examples a little bit and some other things that you'll kind of be able to see. So anyways, let's get into the jungle portion now. Okay, so now on to jungle, and I realize this is going to be a long video. 15 minutes and I'm only through the first role, and yeah, we have 5 rules as well as a bunch of other things to go through. So this will be a long one, but anyways, jungle now, types of champions. So we have tanks, early game bruisers, early game assassins, and then scaling and farming champs. You could classify it in other ways, but the reason I'm classifying it like this is because I feel like this is the difference in how you would actually play the game. Like for example, playing an early game or a late game, or rather playing a tank that scales really well and farms really well versus a carry that farms and scales really well, it doesn't really change a lot of the jungle macro. That's why I just have scaling and farming champs as one category. So starting with tanks and their main goal. So the main goal of a tank is to facilitate their teammates through good pathing. So what do I mean by this? So what I mean by this is, as a tank, you need to still farm efficiently because farming is always really, really valuable so that you can be tankier later on the game. However, you need to understand that you need to impact these lanes, unlike a carry scaling champion who can kind of just farm and ignore their laners early. So the way you're going to do this is by properly pathing. So if you have a really, really strong laner on one side of the map, you're going to want to path towards them. The reason you want to path towards a strong laner is because that's the highest likelihood of a gank working out early, or of you getting good kills for your team and kind of playing around your strength and facilitating your strength. So the way you're going to do this, let's say hypothetically the top laner is really, really strong, but my bottom lane, they're not very strong. Well, then I'm going to path towards the top laner early, which means I would start on my bottom side and then go straight to my top side afterwards and then get the scuttle. And then after I've done that, I'll now potentially look for a gank within that 20 or 30 seconds before my bottom side of the map spawns again. So that's a really, really important thing to understand, because you're going to hit level 5 on that timer. You're going to be really, really strong overall, especially a lot of tanks early on level 5. They have really good ganking. So that's something that's important to understand for sure. Then we have itemization against enemy carries. We spoke about that with top lane tanks. It's the same for jungle, so I'm not really going to go super deep on that. But again, just remember, you know, whoever the enemy carry is, whoever's the most fed, you want to get items that counter that the most. Make sure you're farming well. You can't just not farm just because you're a tank. Tanks still need gold. So make sure you're farming so you can be tanky, so you can build these proper items and overall be really strong. And then your goal in team fights is to create space. So what do I mean by creating space? Basically, you want separation between your carries and the enemy dangerous members, and then you want to be applying pressure to the enemy carries. So the way that you're going to do this, you're going to stand in front of your carry. Let's say an AD carry, let's say an assassin, whoever. You're going to be in front of them. And then you're going to be in a way, or standing in a way, where it's hard for the enemy to properly land their spells and get onto your teammates. So let's say the enemy has an Ahri. I want to try to be in a position where Ahri's charm will hit me instead of my my carry, for example. Or let's say they have a Zed. I want to make sure that I'm saving my Maokai dash ability to dash onto Zed as soon as he ults onto my carry, so that Zed can't fully combo and kill my carry. These types of things you need to understand, and then you simultaneously need to understand that you need to be in a position to threaten the enemy carry. So let's say the enemy carry is a Vayne, and I am I don't know, what's a tank jungler? Why can't let's say I'm a Rammus. If I'm Rammus, I want to jump onto the enemy Vayne, but maybe the Vayne has QSS. And that means that they'll stop my CC if I hit them, because they'll just QSS it. And so I'm going to wait until they use their QSS, and then as soon as I see QSS used, then I'll Rammus ult onto them, I'll taunt them, whatever. So keeping your spells and waiting for your spells to be used until you see these key defensive things come out from the enemy carries is a great way to get on top of them as well. So that's the main thing about tanks in jungle. Now we have early game bruiser jungles. So they're going to want to create a lot of skirmishes, and they can gank pretty well. So the way that you're going to create a lot of skirmishes is by pathing the same way as the enemy paths. So let's say that you know the enemy are starting on their blue buff, because maybe it's like a Zed or an Olaf or a champion who starts on their blue buff a lot. Well, in that case, you want to start on your red buff, because if you're on your red buff and they're on their blue buff, you're on the same side of the map. And because you're really good at skirmishing and fighting early, you want to fight that, jungle early, so then you can be on the scuttle at the same time, fight him on the scuttle, and create those early advantages and skirmishes. You need to make sure, though, that you're pathing towards a strong lane. So just because the Zed starts blue buff and you're stronger early game, say as a Vi than Zed, it doesn't mean you should always path on the same side of him if, say, you have a really, really weak early game on the top side, whereas they have a really strong early game champion, because then you'll get rotated on, that type of thing. So that's important, but generally we want to try to path in a way where we can fight a lot early against these weaker early game champions. And then you just want to keep up the pace of the game through efficient pathing. So after you create these skirmishes, you want to make sure as soon as your camps are up, you're going back to farm them. So let's say, I do my full clear, I clear my bot side, then my top side, then I get a scuttle, and maybe I get an early gank or whatever. Right after that gank works out, or even if the gank doesn't work out, I'm going to recall, spend my gold, go back to my bottom side, and I'm going to start farming my camps again. We're going to talk about key jungle timers, so you'll understand exactly when your camps are going to spawn. But generally speaking, if you start on your red buff and you clear it right away, it's going to respawn at, let's say, about 3:15, because it takes about 2 minutes and 30 seconds, so it'd be about 3:15 roughly. And if you start on your Krugs, the rocks or whatever, or on a small camp, then that would respawn at about 2:30 to 2:40. So that's how you can kind of understand by what time you need to be back into the other side of the map. Then we have early game assassins' goals. And so their goal is really, really, really selfish pathing. Farm, 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 farm. Use the fact that you're really strong early game as an assassin to farm as much as possible, and then after you've farmed everything, then you look for ganks. So usually this would be a champion like Zed, Talon, whatever. You're going to farm, full clear your whole thing, all of your camps. After you farm all your camps, probably recall for your pen boots if you can, but oftentimes you might find a gank, do whatever, and then you go right back to farming as soon as your camps come up, farm again, then once your camps aren't up, you look for maybe a quick gank. But it's really, really important to make sure you're farming as much as possible. When the enemy, they over gank or whatever, you can find an invade angle, because usually your champion has a lot of mobility, which makes it easy to escape. Like a Talon, for example, can go over the walls. So if you know that the enemy has camps up and they're on the opposite side of the map, you can quickly invade and stuff like that as well. And then lastly, we have scaling and farming champions. And so what they're going to do is the opposite of what an early game bruiser is going to do, which is what I call avoidant pathing. So if you know that the enemy is going to start on their blue buff, then you start on your blue buff, because then you're going to be pathing away from them. Your goal is basically to just farm all of your camps as quickly as possible, but to pretty much not interact with the enemy unless you see really, really easy ganks. If you see an AZ gank, of course, go for it. But for the most part, it's perfectly fine to be 0, 0, and 0 by 5 minutes. Even if your teammates are losing lane, doing bad, whatever, you have the ability to carry once you hit 3 items, 4 items, because you scale really well. And so you really need to hit those certain item spikes, even if your team is doing bad. And some people, they'll tell me, well, I do what you say, Talon, and then I lose the game, and it feels really bad because my teammates flame me and whatever. If you want to play a scaling and farming champion like Nyla, like Echo, whatever, you need to accept that this is a reality of playing these champions. Your teammates are going to be mad that you don't gank them early, but they're going to be very happy when you carry them later. And so you're going to have to be good enough to carry as well. And just the simple thing is, if you want to be able to help your laners early, then play a different type of champion. Don't play a scaling farming champion. Play an early game bruiser, play a Vi, play an Amumu, play whatever, right? Because those champions, they can actually help their team early. It's as simple as that. Just want to make that very clear. Again, efficient farming to reach your item spikes. You want to make sure you're hitting at least 2 items by second dragon. You want to make sure you're hitting at least 3 items before third dragon. You probably want to be on 4 items at least by the elder. Very, very selfish gameplay. Farm, farm, farm. That is really what you need to understand as a scaling farming jungler. Then going on to the jungle points. Really want to point out a lot of these points were given to me by the current rank 3 on North America. His name is Big Wall. We linked his Twitch at the end here. Really, really good jungle. Shout out to Big Wall for these tips. First thing, efficiency is key. So you just have to farm really, really well, as we've spoken about many times throughout my videos, throughout this last jungle slide that we just went over. Make sure when your camps are spawning, you're farming them, and the only real exception is when an objective is up or when you see a really, really free kill. Generally be relatively selfish. Depends on the champion. Obviously, if you're playing a Rammus, you're not going to be as selfish as if you're playing a Nyla. But generally speaking, selfishness is going to be rewarded, especially in solo and duo queue. Be decisive. Don't question where you should be on the map, because every second is extremely valuable in the jungle. Because every second that one of your camps is not cleared is literally you losing anywhere from 1 to 2 to even 3 gold a second. So you're really needing to maximize this gold, and the way you can do that is through not only efficiency and selfishness, but also decisiveness. So if you see a play and you're like, no, I'm going to gank them, I don't care, just go do it. Don't sit there for 10 minutes wondering whether you should gank or farm because Talon told you to farm, but I don't know, Royal or whoever told you to gank. I don't think it doesn't matter. The point is, I love you, Royal, but decisiveness is key. It's better to make a bad decision quickly than to make a good decision 10 minutes too late. So keep that in mind. After that, you need to be very aggressive and confident on a small champion pool. This is something that Big Wall really stressed to me specifically. He's also a Spanish-speaking player, by the way. He speaks English, but he kind of uses a translator because his English is not the best. So if you speak Spanish especially, go watch him. But he really stressed this to me, is that you need a small champion pool and you need to know the limits of them perfectly. So instead of playing 5, 10, 15 champions that you find fun, choose 2, choose 3 champions. Literally just to your best of your ability, try to limit test as much as possible, be super aggressive, become super confident with all of the mechanics, all the damage, you know exactly what you can do, so that you're never worried, because then you can be way more decisive because you know how well your champions can do in different scenarios. You know the strengths, you know the weaknesses, all those types of things. After that, don't show on the map unnecessarily. The biggest strength of a jungler is that they don't have a wave that they have to go to, and so because of that, you can often not show yourself on the map for prolonged periods of time, and then the enemy will not know where you are, and you can really surprise them. So don't show yourself on the map when you don't need to. Only show yourself when it really is necessary. Then you should clear each side of the map twice before an objective. So usually what this is going to look like, I'm going to clear, let's say I start red side, doesn't matter if you start red or blue, but in this hypothetical, let's say I start red. So I go to my red side, clear all my red, immediately clear my blue, then I go scuttle, and then say I recall. Now I go back to my bottom side, maybe I look for a quick gank, then my bottom side spawns again, clear my bottom side, clear my top side, and then boom, I'm done. And now maybe there's 30 seconds before the objective, maybe I gank, maybe I do nothing. But you always need to do like each side twice, 95% of the time at least. After this, second dragon is the best comeback timer. So say you're behind as a jungler, your team's doing poorly, and the second dragon is a minute away from spawning. I want you to quickly farm your camps, and then after you farmed your camps, go to whichever side of the map is the opposite of wherever the dragon is, and just play for that turret. Get the minions there, get your jungle camps, maybe steal the enemy jungle camps, play for the turret, try to kill someone, because they're going to be trying to be distracted, or they're going to be distracted by trying to get the dragon. And so as they're trying to get the dragon and whatever, you go for this opposite side, you create a lot of gold for yourself, and then by third dragon, you can potentially come back because you're a lot stronger now. After this, small thing, but kite your camps towards the next camp or gank. So what I mean by this is when you're farming a camp, wherever the next thing you want to do is, whether it's you want to go for a different camp after that or you want to go for a gank, make sure that in between every auto attack on that that jungle camp, that you're walking towards your next jungle camp. So you're going to walk, or you're going to auto attack the minion or the camp rather, then walk towards, let's say, you know, whatever the next camp is. Auto attack, walk towards it, auto attack, walk towards it, and just bring it closer and closer towards wherever you're going to go next. That saves you a lot of time. Then Herald over Dragon. Generally Herald is better than Dragon. It gives you more immediate gold. Dragon isn't really useful until third Dragon because, you know, you have the soul then, but Dragon just doesn't give you as much value. If you already won 3 dragon fights, you probably would win the game anyway, so it doesn't really actually matter that you got the soul. It matters way more that you're stronger for the second and third dragon fight, which Herald allows you to do. However, make sure you play around your strong lane. So if your strong lane is the dragon lane, then do the dragon instead because that's your strong lane. It's really important to understand whoever is the strongest on your team is usually who you want to play around, almost always. Now after that, here's the jungle guide and then the link to Big Wall's Twitch. Now let's go into mid lane. All right, now I get to talk to you guys about my current favorite role, mid lane. So types of champs in mid lane, you got your mages, assassins, you got tanks, lane bullies, and then kind of roaming champions. So starting off with the mage. The mage is, I would say, the jungle equivalent of the selfish farming carry champion that's scaling. Because you just want to gain small lane leads, you want to play very efficiently, and then you play to really scale. So the way you're going to gain these small lane leads is through poke. So usually mages, they have a really good poke in lane, but they don't really have the mana early game or the damage to kill someone. So your goal as like a Syndra and Orianna type of champion, it's not to necessarily kill your teammate in lane or your opponent in lane. It's to have, let's say, 70% health to their 50% or something like that, so that the enemy can potentially get ganked by your jungle if they show up. But otherwise, you're going to just have this lane slowly pushing, so once again, you can crash the item on your boots power spike. So the same way as we spoke about in Baron lane, you're going to want to be crashing that wave on the third wave to get your mana boots, potentially fourth wave if you need to. But then you crash that wave, you get the boots, you come back, and then you start to be a much stronger champion. In team fights, that's really where you shine, especially on second and third item. So again, you want to be hitting your key item spikes at key timers. So you're going to be able to, farm really, really well to get towards your second item by second dragon, or your third item by third dragon. And then once you hit that death cap on your third item, which is usually when most mages build it, you're then going to be very, very strong. And so you're really just, again, it's okay to go down a little bit in gold as a team or even as yourself. It's okay if all these things happen. You just need to make sure that no matter what, your focus is gold, gold, gold. That means I'm going to the mid lane, I'm clearing the mid lane. Right after I clear the mid lane, maybe there's a bot lane that I can go to right after. Maybe I can, get a quick jungle camp depending on what point in the game we are. Whatever way you can, just get that gold on yourself, and then in the team fights, that's really where you're going to shine. Then we have assassins. So assassins also really, really want to find recalls on their boots, because once they hit the boots, they have kill pressure. Usually, when you recall on boots, you're going to be level 4, maybe level 5. And then if you hit those boots, you're going to definitely have an all-in potential on any squishy champion. So like Zed, for example, he hits level 5, he hits his pen boots, and then boom, he can one-shot most laners, stuff like that. And then usually you're going to start roaming on level 5. So by level 5, you're probably, maybe you find a quick all-in on your laner, but if you don't find the all-in, then you're just going to start roaming. You're just going to push the lane and you're going to roam. Push the lane, roam. Come back when the wave comes back. Push it, roam. Push it, roam. And you're just doing that until 5 minutes when the dragon spawns. Late game, your goal is to target enemy carries. So the way you're going to do this, let's say that there is a Fed Kai'Sa on the enemy team. Well, Kai'Sa has her ultimate. She has her invisibility. She has maybe a stasis. Maybe she has a veil from her teammate, whatever. So because of all these things, you need to be very patient. You need to wait for them to go out. You cannot be the one to start the fight. You have to wait until you see at least a couple of those things. Wait till you see the stasis. Wait till you see the ultimate. And then you go in, you find your moment. And if you ever can't kill the AD carry, or whoever the carry is, even if it's not an AD carry, maybe they're too tanky, maybe they have too many escape tools, whatever, target someone else. You can often target, for example, the support. So maybe it's a Kai'Sa Lulu. You target the Lulu so the Lulu can't buff the Kai'Sa. These types of things are really important. But generally, target priority, you're going to prioritize the squishy, high-value targets on the enemy team. After that, we have tanks. The goal of tanks, similar to top lane, is to neutralize the enemy laner and then play to push and roam. So the same thing as an assassin, where it's like, okay, first couple levels, you just play to go even. You don't want to, take a lot of trades. You're just kind of whatever. And then once you get, your first recall off, or you're getting close to level 5, you start to just push and roam again. It's the same thing. You push, you roam, you push, you roam. Team fights is going to be the same as jungler Baron lane tank, so we already spoke about that, so I won't bore you guys too much. But basically, you're trying to create space between your carries and the enemy, most dangerous people, while simultaneously putting pressure onto the enemy carries. After that, we have a lane bully. So you're going to punish last hits really, really hard on a lane bully. Same thing we talked about top lane again, as kind of a ranged champion. Every time that an enemy minion, or rather every time that your minion's really low, the enemy is going to walk up to it. And so when the enemy is going to walk up to that minion, you're going to want to pressure them really hard so that they have to choose between killing the minion or between taking damage from you. So that's really the main thing. And then you use the fact that you have really good laning to potentially get solo kills in lane, and then use that solo kill potential to obviously have a really big lead and then carry later on. Same as other champions, you can crash the wave on your boots if you don't have a kill angle early. And then once you get onto those boots, if you find no way to kill the enemy because they're playing too safe, then use the fact that you have the control over the wave to also just push and roam. So notice how pretty much every type of champion, if you can't kill your laner, you can just push and roam. And we'll speak about that more in a second. But then roaming champions are the last thing. So you're just going to lane as normal as a roaming champion. Roaming champs could be things like Annie, Lysandra, Galio, who also kind of fits into a tank as well. But like all these types of champs. So you're just going to lane as normal. Maybe you kill, maybe you don't, whatever. But then after your first recall, you're going to time your wave crash with your jungle camps to create ganks. So what I mean by this is, let's say your jungle has 2 camps left, and you have a wave that's coming in 10 seconds. You want to push that wave that's coming in 10 seconds as quick as possible, because your jungle, by that time, will have cleared pretty much all of his camps. And what's he going to do after he cleared his camps? Well, he's a solo queue jungle, so he's probably going to randomly die in int. But let's say, you know, he's one of those rare jungles who doesn't suck at Wild Rift. So in that case, he's probably going to look for a gank because he has no camps to do. And if he does look for a gank, you want to be in a position to follow up. So because of the fact that the enemy or that your jungle has no camps, you want your waves to be crashing on the turret at a similar time to when he's finishing his camps so that you can roam with him. Lost my spot here for a second. Where are we at? So yeah, time with that. And then yeah, the last thing is the goal of a roam. This is important to stress. Thank you, Shyster Nick, for pointing this out to me. The goal of a roam is to create more gold value than you gave up. So let's say you roamed and you pushed the wave, but then your roam ends up lasting a pretty long time. You expect maybe I'm going to lose 400 gold because maybe they're going to get a plate and I'm going to lose a wave for it. Well, then you need to make sure that you're getting at least 400 gold value from that roam, whether that means getting a kill to your teammate because then the kill plus the assist is going to be about 400 gold, or maybe that means breaking a turret or doing whatever. You need to make sure that the gold value you're generating is overall higher than the gold value you're giving up. That's essentially the plain and simple version of playing roaming champions, or just making a roam on any champion, really. Then, again, main mid lane points, push before roaming. Do not roam right away, almost ever. You almost always want to push your lane first, because if you don't push your lane, then you're going to lose more gold than you're going to gain, because you're going to lose the minions really quick. The minions are going to go on your tower, you're going to lose turret plates, you're going to lose a lot. Generally, just push your lane before roaming. Second, avoid ARAM. If your teammates all go mid lane for whatever reason in the mid game, go to a side lane. It's okay to not be in the mid lane 24/7. It's okay to go to the side, clear the waves in the side lane. Just because you're the mid laner in the early game doesn't mean you have to spend 24/7 in mid lane later. After that, again, punish last hits. We've talked a lot about that, so pretty straightforward. Side lane, same side of objective. So remember how I said for Baron laners and split pushers, you want a side lane on the opposite side of the objective? Well, as a mid laner, generally, you want to be on the same side because then you're able to come to the objective quick. So your goal as a side lane, mid laner is just get the wave pushed, and then once I push that wave in the side lane, now I go and help my team on the objective, or I go and fight, because usually the mid laner actually wants to team fight. They don't want to just side lane. Maybe if you're playing some weird mid lane, like I've seen people play Camille mid, Fiora mid, maybe then you're going to side lane opposite side. If your Baron laner ends up, understanding that. But generally speaking, you split push on the same side of the objective. Roam with your jungle. Again, remember how I said timing your wave crash with the enemy jungle's camp clearing so you can rotate with them at the same time. That is really, really valuable to understand. And then generally, you need to understand how you need to be good enough to be able to tell how the lane is going to go within 3 levels. So let's say after 3 levels, you have the enemy really, really low. Well, then you have a likely chance of killing them, and you can play for your lane phase. You can play to try to kill the people in lane. But let's say it's hard to get an advantage. Maybe it's a hard matchup and the enemy is too hard to kill. Maybe the enemy is playing under their turret, and it's just not possible to dive them under their turret. Well, then play to roam, right? So it's basically, you're winning lane, you're doing well. You can play to try to get kills in lane and get a big, big lead. If they're playing, very, very scared and whatever, then you need to try to roam a lot. That's essentially the plain and short of it. And again, mid lane guide linked here. Now let's go on to my least favorite role, attack damage carry. Okay, so now we have AD carry. So the types of AD carries that we have are kind of auto attackers, ability based champs, high range champs versus low range champs, and then scaling versus early game. So basically the classifications I've made here are 3 separate things, where it's like the auto attack versus ability based, then there's the high range versus low range, and there's the scaling versus early game. Now, it's very likely that you could be an ability-based champs who's also high range and a late-game champ. So essentially, there's, champions can fall into multiple different ones of these categories, but there's specific differences between playing these different types of champs, and so I'm just going to go over, all those different things. So, for example, an ability-based champs with high range, or an ability-based champ with high range would be like Ezreal. An ability-based champ, or rather, an auto attacker with low range would be like a Lucian. So there's these different types of things, and that's just something to keep in mind. So starting off with auto attacking champions, so it's pretty straightforward. A champion who autos a lot. A champion like, Kai'Sa autos a good amount. She does have some ability, but like mostly autos. Tristana autos a lot. Sivir, these types of champions. So in lane, you're going to play to punish last hits with autos, because obviously anytime someone walks up for a last hit, you auto attack them. They're focused on autoing the minion. You auto attack them, and you just win the trade. In team fights, your goal is to stack lethal tempo on frontline and wait out key spells. So basically, in the start of the fight, you're just going to auto attack whoever's in front of you, whoever's the easiest to hit. And then once your lethal tempo is on like 5 stacks, 6 stacks, then you start to go more forward once the enemy used their dangerous spells. So maybe Zed just ulted someone else. Well, that's your cue to go forward. Maybe the Amumu just ulted. Well, now you go forward because the Amumu ults out. These types of things. Once those key spells that are really dangerous to you are out, and once you have your lethal tempo stacked up, you're going to go more far forward. Ability-based champs' goal is to use abilities when enemy go for last hits. So let's say we'll use a Varus first ability whenever the enemy is standing still to last hit, or Ezreal first ability, whatever. Prio is very important for teamfight champions. So if you guys don't know what Prio is, it basically means that you have the lane pushing towards them. So you have more minions and your minions are higher health, so that it's going to push into the enemy turret. The reason Prio is so important for a ranged ability-based champion is because it's a lot easier to land spells on people when they're stuck killing minions and when they're stuck under their turret, because they just have less places to walk. So that's why you really need Prio as an ability-based champion. Then in team fights, instead of stacking your lethal tempo on key members, you're going to just poke key members with your spells. And then once you're done poking them, once the key spells of the enemy are gone again, then you go farther forward. Next is high range champions. So high range champions want to push really hard in lane and have a lot of prio similar to ability based champions, and then they're going to pressure the plates and poke at the same time. So anytime that the enemies stay really far under their turret and you're like a Caitlyn, for example, just auto attack the turret and then try to get plates out of the turret, and then when the enemy walk up, you use your high range to poke them and pressure them. In team fights, you're going to generally just want to space champs ability ranges by holding the auto attack button rather than tapping it. So if you hold onto the auto attack button and then you lock your target onto whoever you want to target, then as soon as that person's in your range, you'll immediately auto attack them. But if you tap your auto attack button, like I know a lot of you do, then you're not going to necessarily be able to tell when you're on the very edge of their range, and they're going to be able to close the gap easier. So generally, you're just trying to utilize that range really hard to make it hard for the enemy to engage on you, and you need to keep track of their spell engage ranges, and again, track the key spells as always. Short range champions need to be more careful about pushing in lane because they could get frozen on really easily, and they don't have the range to break that freeze. So you're going to make sure that you only really push hard when you know that you're not going to be pressured by the enemy, maybe because you're just a lot stronger early game or whatever. And then after that, use the fact that the enemy is standing still to auto attack to close the gap. So a lot of people tell me it's really hard to play into Caitlyn, for example, as a Lucian, which it is. Caitlyn counters Lucian because of the range advantage. And so the way that you're going to kind of be okay with this is whenever you see a Caitlyn stand still to auto attack, maybe because she's trying to auto attack you, or maybe because she's auto attacking a minion, use the time that they stand still, because you have to stand still to auto attack, to then walk forward and close that gap. So for example, you see Caitlyn, stand still, immediately dash onto her as a Lucian, start auto attacking. And because usually those higher range champions, they have less damage per second compared to shorter range champions like Draven or Lucian, you use that fact that now you've closed the gap to just win the trade. After that, we have a couple more. So we have scaling champions. So the goal of a scaling champion is just to go even in lane and use key timers to create gold. So for example, a key timer is the dragon. Maybe on the dragon, you guys are not winning the dragon fight, and so you just auto attack the turret and you play for the wave and the minions and the gold in order to hit your key item spikes. You want to make sure that you're not really fighting super hard until you hit your spikes. So as a Kai'Sa, that's often going to be 2 and 3 items especially. As a Vayne, that's going to be usually hitting your 3rd and 4th item. Hitting these different item spikes on the key timers, again, the objective timers, and then fighting around those objectives once you've hit your item spikes is really important, but it's important to not overforce fights early game because you're okay with maybe falling slightly behind. Now the opposite is true for early game champions, where their goal is to win their lane really hard and then use the fact that they won the lane to take plates around the map. So let's say early on you killed the bottom lane turret as a fed Draven. Well, now we're going to push the wave on the bottom lane, recall, spend our gold, and then we're going to go top lane and now break top lane turrets. So you kind of want to spread your lead around the map a lot more as these early game champions, but make sure that if you are going to other lanes, that you first push your own lane. Because if you don't push your own lane, then the enemy are going to get that gold back really easily, and then you're not going to be happy. Additional notes, prio in bot lane matters more than other lanes, so it's really important, again, to have that prio, to have the lane pushing. You get level 2 off of the 4th minion, or I wrote this wrong. I guess I wrote this as though it was for a different lane, but it's actually this. So You get level 2 off of the first minion of the second minion wave as a dual laner because you're sharing the XP with your teammate. So you're not going to get it you're not going to get level 2 off the fourth minion of the first wave, but instead you get it off the first minion of the second wave. Then again, spell tracking, make sure when the enemy use their key spells you go forward, and when those key spells are still up that you're playing pretty safe. And then recall timers are really important. So key recall timers, again, your boots as any other champion. You crash the third wave, you get your boots. Another key recall timer is about 30 seconds before the objective. You make sure you push the wave, you recall so you're ready for the objective. Those are going to be the main things. There's going to be other ones, but that's kind of the main stuff to understand. So then some additional ADC things. Play around your item spikes. Don't play really, really aggressive when you're 200 gold from your, Infinity Edge. Make sure you farm one wave, recall, get that, and then fight more aggressively. Stay on a horizontal line with your support. So basically, you want to be able to be in range to auto attack someone at the same time that your support's in range to auto attack or engage on them. You don't want to be going really far forward when your support's really far back. So that's really important to understand as well. Then track key spells. Again, we've spoken about that a lot. After that, make sure that you get mid control before objectives. So even if you're in the dual lane, make sure your dual lane's pushed out, but about 30 seconds before the objective, especially the third, fourth, objective, stuff like that later in the game, make sure that you're controlling the mid lane as well, that you push the mid lane out before the objective. Again, be patient in fights. Notice how when you have lethal tempo, I said to stack your lethal tempo. When you're a poke champion, I said to poke. Do not rush a fight. It's okay to be patient, wait for these spells to come out, and then go far forward afterwards. Make sure you're doing that. And then again, prio is really, really important in bot lane, as we kind of mentioned. So those are the main points. Here's the ADC guide. Now going on to support. Okay, guys, so then we have supports, and it's going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to have tanks, enchanters, and then sort of the mage slash kind of carry support type of style. So tank supports generally are going to be playing more for an all-in in lane. So you need to trade a lot around jungle. So obviously, because you don't really have range, you don't have much poke, but usually you're going to take ignite and you have crowd control to, really CC your opponent, keep them in place, which is why you really want to look for these all-in angles. And usually if you trade hard around your jungle, you're going to be able to do that. So whenever your jungle is pathing towards you, you make more aggressive trades, you play more for kind of, the all-in, that type of thing. And then if your jungle is pathing away from you, generally you're kind of just going to chill in the bush. You're going to kind of wait. And yeah, you're kind of just going to wait till your jungle is more in a position to follow up, or if the enemy really, really overextend. You're going to use prio and recall timers to roam. So anytime that you push the lane, the wave under their turret, and you don't really have anything to do in lane, you're going to use those timings to roam, to go help your teammates to go do whatever. The other timing you're going to use to roam is after you recall. So let's say that you recall after you crash a wave with your teammate. Instead of walking directly back to lane, walk through the middle of the jungle so that you could either go towards mid lane or back to your own lane. And then as you get closer and closer to the lane, determine whether or not it looks easier to go towards mid to help for a kill, or whether you should just go back to your ADC. Additionally, play for vision and rotate with jungle. So the way you're going to play for vision is usually after you push a wave again with your teammate, then you can go ward an enemy, an enemy camp. You can ward the bushes. You can ward the objective, whatever. That's typically how you're going to utilize vision, because you're pretty tanky, so you can kind of survive even if one person tries to get you as you go for vision. And then rotate with your jungle. So when your jungle goes for an objective, oftentimes you're going to want to go with them. When your jungle's looking for a gank, that's going to be a good timer for you to maybe roam and help your jungle, that type of thing. And then team fighting is going to be the same as the team fighting on other tanks that we spoke about. After that, we have enchanters. The goal of enchanters is to poke in lane, get through the early game, and then scale really hard with the hyper carry in the late game. In the mid game, you're going to follow the carry and pretty much never leave them. So if your jungle is doing really, really, really well, follow your jungle all around. If your ADC is doing really well, follow them everywhere. It's pretty much you just follow the carry. Like, genuinely, enchanters are so easy. I really recommend only playing enchanters mostly in duo queue. Playing them in solo queue, except for maybe like Nami, maybe Janna, it's really, really hard. So generally that's what I recommend as well. And then in team fights, keep track of key spells and find ways to respond. So what I mean by find ways to respond is things like Veil, for example, things like your shield, that type of thing. So let's say we're playing Janna, for example, and they have 2 champions who are really, really dangerous. Well, I'll use maybe my first ability to stop one of those dangerous champions from going on my teammate, and the other, dangerous champion, I'll use my ultimate, and then maybe they also have an Ashe who I'm worried about the Ashe arrow. Well, then I'll keep track of the Ashe arrow, and I'll use my Veil to spell shield my teammate when I see an Ashe arrow. So keep track of how you can respond to those spells in the team fights, that type of thing. And then lastly, we have mages. The mages want to poke in lanes similar to enchanters, but in the mid game, you're able to actually clear waves yourself and to focus a bit more on damage and being a bit more selfish. And then you want to make sure you get to the objective before the enemy so you can poke out the enemy. Because, if they have to walk into you, it's really easy to poke. Whereas it's really hard to poke if the enemy are on the objective and you are kind of stuck pretty deep behind them. So that's the main kind of differences between the different types of champions and support. Also want to mention roaming. When you are roaming, generally you want to pay attention to the enemy duo lane and determine whether or not they can dive your ADC by themselves. So if you think that the enemy ADC or the enemy duo lane is really, really dangerous to dive your teammate, so maybe it's a Draven and a Thresh, right? Or a Leona and a Lucian. Champions who are really good at diving and tanking up the turret, usually tanks are really good at tanking it, then you're probably not going to want to roam as much. But say that you have, the enemy being, I don't know, Vayne and Yuumi. Well, they're not going to dive very well, so as long as your ADC is not playing really dumb, you're probably going to be able to roam more often. You also want to pay attention to what ADC champion you have. Usually ADC champions that are best on their own are ones that have good self-peel and ones that have good wave clear. So good self-peel would be things like Xayah with her ultimate to defend her, or Kai'Sa with her ultimate and her dash and everything like that to defend her. And then good wave clear would be champions like Varus, who can just use their first ability really, really effectively to kill the wave really quickly, or Ezreal, who can use his ultimate on the wave and has high range as well. And then generally, it's an easier role mechanically, so use the extra time to find value in small ways. So what this means is keeping track of jungle pathing as you're laning, because your champions are pretty easy. It's going to be pretty straightforward. These types of things, understanding that is important. And then lastly, we have some more notes here. So don't stay with bad ADCs after early game. Just play around the strongest member. Don't follow your bad players. Play around your good players. Play on a horizontal line with ADC, same as when I was talking about an ADC. Make sure that you're able to auto-attack people at the same time. You're in the same range as each other. You're not going super, super far forward when the rest of your team is nowhere near to follow. Rotate with the jungle, as we already mentioned. Play for level diffs. Again, first minion of the second minion wave gives level 2. That's a really, really key timer. I don't know why I keep saying really, really, but I do. Cryo is most important in bot lane. I already mentioned that with ADC as well. And then keep track of key spells to protect carry. So unlike an ADC, where the ADC is keeping track of the spells to protect themselves, you're keeping track of those spells so that you can stop your teammate from dying. So that's overall the support role. Those are all the roles. I know it took a long time, but I don't want to make this video short because it's literally supposed to be going over every part of Wild Rift. So I'm going to take my time explaining these things. So now we're going to go on to wave management next. Okay. Now we have wave management, and there's going to be 3 types of wave management. There's going to be a slow push, a fast push, and a freeze. And I describe it, honestly, this is, in my opinion, one of the best videos I've ever made. It's pretty concise, straightforward, with really good examples. If you, I recommend clicking on this and just literally skipping this part that I'm about to go through and just watch this video. That's what I recommend you do. And then you go to the point after, the point where we'll talk about laning afterwards. But I'm still going to talk about it for those that don't want to do that. So starting off with a slow push. So a slow push is basically only last hitting the minions to create a small minion advantage that will slowly push the wave towards the enemy tower. So basically, you're just going to only auto-attack the minions slightly more than your opponent so that you can build up even a second wave because you don't kill the wave very quickly so it doesn't go under the tower quickly. And then you have a really, really big minion army, which is really scary and really big and really cool. And then the goal of that slow push is to build this big wave, as we spoke about, your minion army. Potentially even grab a Scorpion if you're the Baron laner. You're gonna get the level advantage because you're gonna have so many minions that they didn't kill. So maybe you're level 5, they're level 4, you're level 3, they're level 2, whatever. And then you're gonna crash this wave on a timer where you can get really, really good value. So one good value that you could get is, say your jungle's ganking soon, and then you create a dive angle with your jungle because your jungle's there at the same time. And then if you dive them and you kill them, they're gonna lose all of those huge minions that you got, and you're just gonna completely snowball the game. Now, another thing that could potentially happen is you realize you can't actually kill them under their turret. Well, that's okay. Just recall immediately you're going to get a better recall than them because they're going to be stuck clearing minions for a while, and then you get control over the next wave, so you're still happy even in that case. And then lastly, you could roam. So after you crash this huge wave, they're going to be stuck for a while, you go and roam, you help your team, you get vision, you do whatever. After that, we have a fast push. Fast push, pretty straightforward. You push the wave as fast as possible. The goal of this is to get the minions under the turret as quick as possible so that you can make different decisions. So, for example, recall or roam, right? You want to create a timer to recall or roam on because you realize, oh, I need my item, whatever. I need to roam to go help my teammate. Doesn't matter. That's why we're fast pushing. Or you could really, really quickly dive an enemy. So, mainly, you know, say that you only have 3 minions, but you know all you need is the minion to tank it long enough so that you can, you know, get under the turret and hit the enemy. Then you could just dive them anyways if you're just that much stronger. And then the main difference between a fast and a slow push is timing. So slow pushes, they're going to be slow, they're going to be building up a wave or two, and then you crash with a really, really big wave. Fast push is like, oh, this is urgent, I need to do it now, so I'm going to get the wave under the tower as quick as possible. Then lastly, we have a freeze. So a freeze is basically keeping the wave on your side of the map or keeping the wave in a neutral point by keeping the enemy minion health or their numbers slightly higher than yours. So basically say that we each have 4 minions, but their minions are slightly higher health. Or maybe they have 5 minions and I have 4 minions. But I basically want to keep the minions on my side of the map, and I do that by keeping the minion health relatively close between the two, but maybe the enemy is slightly higher. The main goal of this is to allow yourself to farm pretty safely. So if you're able to farm really safe because it's under your turret, you know, maybe you're in a bad matchup, that's why you'd want to freeze. But then you can also create an all-in angle on the enemy because they're going to have to walk up. Because if you froze it on them, if they just don't walk up, the wave will stay there forever and they're not going to be able to ever get gold. So they have to walk up on you, and then if you're stronger than them, you can walk on them and all in them. And then it also allows you to become less gankable. The only thing is beware of a dive. So you know how I spoke about slow pushing and then crashing as you hit level 5 while the enemy are level 4 and then diving them? Well, the same thing could happen to you if you freeze. So you have to understand, I don't really want to freeze if I'm in a position to get dove. But if I'm, say, a champion where I know I won't get dove because maybe I'm just really, really tanky. I don't know why I keep saying really, really, guys. I apologize for that. But maybe you're very tanky or whatever. You might be okay with freezing, basically. So I would say overall, the most common thing you're going to do is you're going to slow push and then eventually change that to a fast push by crashing a wave under a turret and then using that to recall, roam, whatever. But every once in a while, the freeze becomes an opportune, you know, a good opportunity, usually when you want to all in someone or when you're just, you know, scared of getting ganked, and so you want to stay pretty close to your turret, basically. So now we're going to move on to laning. So a couple of things to understand about laning. Obviously, I have more videos on laning to more specifics, but these are the key things to laning. The first thing is level up timers. So again, in any solo lane, mid lane, top lane, the 4th minion of the first wave will give you level 2. And so when you're hitting level 2 and the enemy are level 1, you want to trade really hard. Or when you hit level 3, they're level 2, they're level 5, you're level 5, they're level 4, whatever. When you are a higher level than your opponent, you're almost always going to want to trade. Trade around cooldowns is the other thing. So if the enemy uses all their spells on you, they completely blow their load on you, because I just wanted to say blow their load, I'm going to be honest. If they blow their load on you, I really need to stop saying that. If they use all of their cooldowns on you, don't immediately run away. Go and trade back on them because they don't have any spells to use on you, right? Whereas, say that, you know, in Echo, he does his third ability, first ability, whatever, he does everything on me, and then I run away, well, now he really, really wins the trade super hard. But say that he does all those things and then I walk right back onto him and I trade with him really hard afterwards, then even if he wins this trade slightly, he's not going to win it as hard because all he has left is auto attacks. Meanwhile, I have my auto attacks and probably all of my abilities up. So understanding these cooldowns and trading around those is important. After that, you need to understand the purpose of your lane versus the enemy's purpose in lane. So for example, a Darius really wants to all in. Notice how I only said really wants there. I didn't say really, really. I'm proud of myself. Again, Darius, he loves to all in people because of his stacks. That's just how his passive works. That's what is strong for him. And then on the other hand, Camille is very much is an ability-based kind of thing. She trades around her cooldowns. So her passive cooldown and her second ability cooldown, she trades around those. And so if I'm a Darius and I let Camille trade around her poke all the time and I don't try to all in her, then I'm going to lose the lane. But if I'm a Camille and I try to all in a level 5 Darius at full health, of course I'm going to lose. And so that's, of course, a very simplified example, but you can extrapolate that example to many different purposes. All-inning, you know, trading around cooldowns, being a poke champion, being a champion who wants to build up and crash a wave, being a champion who really likes trading around level 3, being a champion who likes to trade around level 5. Basically, whatever your champion wants, you want to do everything in your capabilities to get towards that, you know, trading around those priorities while simultaneously denying the enemy whatever priorities they have in lane. If you guys have specific questions about matchups, you can send it in the comments and I can let you know kind of the purpose. Obviously, if it's a champion I play a lot, I'll know the purpose better than if it's a champion I don't play as much. But obviously, you know, I understand most champs pretty well, so feel free to ask me questions on that if you're curious. And then again, crashing on the early boots / items. So usually, you know, you crash the 3rd wave to hit by your boots, or you crash, you know, say 4th wave to get maybe whatever item it is that works for you. But generally, you want to crash a wave right before you're going to hit an item spike, and then recall for that item spike. And again, we kind of describe a lot of these things in the wave management section. And so, yeah, now we'll go into tempo after that. Okay, so next up we have what we call tempo. Basically, tempo is kind of the pace of the game, and I kind of can explain it in sort of a turn-based thing. So basically, essentially, tempo is whose turn it is. So when it's your turn, you have the opportunity to make the aggressive play. You're able to make the decisions. You get to kind of decide what happens. And then when the enemy has tempo, it kind of means that you have to play back. You have to let them do their thing, maybe because they're stronger than you gold-wise. Maybe they're better in a certain stage of the game because of their champions. Maybe they have the lane pushing, whatever. But basically, the ways that you're going to create tempo are a few different ways. The first thing is you're going to properly recall to create a turn. So what this means is that you're going to push the wave first before recalling, or clear your camps before recalling if you're a jungler or whatever. And then once you've done this and then you recall, you spend your gold, and because you've spent that gold, you're now going to likely be stronger than your opponent, and that additional strength, as well as the fact that you pushed the wave first so that the enemy didn't really have much to do, it gives you now the turn to be more aggressive. Similarly, item spikes, right? Kind of the same thing where you're stronger after hitting those item spikes because of recalling, whatever. Next thing is using a wave being pushed to create a turn. So, like I said in mid lane, for example, you want to push your lane before you roam. This is essentially creating a turn and giving you the tempo, because if you push the wave, then the enemy has to respond to the wave. They're stuck responding there, and then you have the tempo to make a play somewhere else. Same in any other lane, where as the support, you push the lane, now you have the tempo to make the play somewhere else. So basically, tempo is overall the pace of the game. Use jungle pathing as well to create a turn. So if your jungle is pathing towards you, then you kind of have the tempo even on that lane, for example, to make, you know, the plays, this type of thing. Being at the objective first, that's also giving you more tempo, because again, it's giving you the agency to kind of make a play. It's giving you sort of you know, it's your turn basically. This type of thing. And then additionally, you want to make sure that you're planning to create additional kind of turns, let's say, right? Because if you are, again, planning to push one wave and then you know, okay, well, I'm going to hit my item spike after one more wave, well, then you're going to quickly push that wave and then immediately recall to get that item spike. Whereas maybe if you weren't planning, you might not realize that fast enough, and then you might end up recalling a wave too early, and then you go get another wave, then you get your item and you have to recall again. So then you don't get as many turns because you had to recall too much. That as well. And then when it is the enemy turn, make sure you just respect that. Let them make the plays. Let them do their thing. Don't be over aggressive. You know, just wait until, again, you hit those different spikes, and then be more aggressive. Okay, so after tempo, then we have warding. So early game, you almost always want to ward a jungle camp if it's possible, and if you can't, then you're going to ward the river. So typically, warding a camp is going to be possible if you are in the advantageous state of the lane. So if you have the lane pushing, you're a stronger early game champion, these types of things, you can ward the camps because you're going to be able to do it really easily without missing out on gold. But if you're getting pushed under your turret and the enemy laner is much stronger than you, then you're probably just going to have to ward the river or ward a bush so that you can at least avoid a dive and know where the enemy jungle is right before they're ganking you or something like that. Early game, don't ward on level 1. As any laner, try to get prio first. So once you have prio, once you have the lane pushed, then after you push the wave under their turret, you can use that time to go ward. The reason this is better is because then you can easily go ward a jungle camp without worry of the enemy jungle potentially killing you, because if you do it level 1, the enemy jungle might be right there in your face and then kill you, and then obviously very, very bad. And if you ward on level 1 as well, your ward will then expire earlier, and that vision's not going to be lasting for as much time as you need, because no jungle is going to gank you level 1 unless they're a really bad player. So generally speaking, you don't need a ward level 1, you need a ward usually level 3 to 5 when they're actually going to gank you. And then about 30 seconds to 60 seconds before an objective, make sure that you push your wave, And then after that, you ward the objective. If you're behind, as in if you're doing worse in the game, you're just going to ward straight up the objective. And then ward the enemy entrance to the objective. So basically ward further, like deeper into their own jungle, if you are ahead, because then you have, again, kind of the tempo to and the aggression to make these, these more aggressive wards, basically. But make sure you're pushing your wave before you ward for objectives. And then during the mid and the late game, when there's no objectives up, ward either the enemy jungle camps or ward bushes, but again, ideally camps, so you can find where the enemy jungle is. I'm going to take a quick sip of water before we go into objectives. Yeah, I'm allowed to drink water, I know. Don't yell at me. I hear you yelling at me. I don't know what I'm saying, guys. I've been recording for a while. I'm going crazy. Either way, next up is objectives. So, again, push your wave about 30 seconds before the objective. Then you give yourself time to recall, to spend your gold to be ready for the objective, to, again, ward as we spoke about, get positioning over the objective, all of these types of things. Next up, again, heralds are better than dragons, and the reason is because one dragon doesn't give very much strength. Only 3 dragons, when you get the soul, give strength, whereas herald gives that immediate strength, and that immediate strength makes you more likely to deny future dragons and to snowball and win the game. It's just much more value overall, whereas having to get all 3 dragons just to get the soul means that, okay, let's say we hypothetically got all 3 dragons. We probably already won the game because we've won a dragon fight at 5 minutes, another dragon fight 5 minutes later, and then another dragon fight 5 minutes after that. So like if you won a fight at 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and 15 minutes, regardless of that dragon's soul strength that you're only getting after that 15 minutes, you were probably already going to win the game because you were winning so many fights. So that's why, logically speaking, it doesn't make a lot of sense to prioritize dragons. However, again, make sure that if your laners that are doing well are in the dragon lane, then you do prioritize the dragon, because you don't want to go to a herald where you're going to die because your top laner is doing really, really bad. But generally, yeah, player on the strong lane, but herald is better. Then, when you're behind, use second dragon as a distraction. Again, we spoke about this in jungle, but I'm going to mention it here for those that are skipping around in the video. The second dragon, about 30 seconds to 60 seconds before that, dragon, if you are behind a significant amount gold-wise as a team, or you just scale really well and you just need to get some extra gold, just use that timer to go on the opposite side of wherever the dragon is and just push that turret, get the waves, get the jungle camps and that everything there. Just get as much gold on that side of the map as the enemy are distracted with the dragon. And then the 12-minute Baron timer means that there's no more side lane chasing. There's no more chasing a random kill. There's no more dumb split pushing too far. Because if you die, if you get caught, if you are on the wrong side of the map, the enemy can get the Baron and that can lose you the game. So early on in the game, pre-12 minutes, you're perfectly fine with being a little over-aggressive, maybe chasing a kill or two, playing mostly for gold and being selfish. But once this Baron timer hits, now, as the mid laner, you need to make sure you're either in mid lane or on the side lane of the Baron side. As the ADC and support, same thing. As the jungler, you're only going to go for your jungle camps on the opposite side of Baron if you know the enemy aren't on the Baron or if you have vision on the Baron. And then the only champion who can really spend a lot of time on the opposite side is going to be the Baron laner. Now, there's going to be some situations where maybe the mid laner happens to be the one on the opposite side and the Baron laner's on the same side. It's fine. We just don't want too many people there. We only want one person maximum on the opposite side of the Baron, and we want to make sure that our jungler is spending a lot of time on the same side of the Baron and not chasing random kills on the side lane, because then the enemy will get the Baron for free. Additionally, don't waste key spells before important objectives. So let's give a couple of examples here. So my flash is 150-second cooldown. Now let's say the Elder Dragon's up in a minute and the Baron's up in 2 minutes. So basically, for the next minute, there's no reason for me to flash within that like first 15 seconds, because the death timers are 45 seconds roughly in the late game. And so if I kill someone 60 seconds before the objective, but I waste my flash for it, then I'm going to be way weaker at the Elder, and they're going to be fine because they are going to respawn 15 seconds before. But if I flash to kill someone 30 seconds before that Elder, well, then it's valuable because that person is going to be dead during the Elder, so it's easy to get Elder. So you need to make sure you're not wasting your key spells on a timer where death timers are slightly shorter than the objective spawn timer, basically. After that, there's some non-obvious key objective timers I want to talk about. So again, right after second dragon, before the first Baron, which is going to be usually roughly 10 to 10 minutes and 30 seconds until the 12-minute period when Baron spawns, you can utilize this to get so much gold because this is a time where there's no objective on the map. And so where you are on the map is not that important because you can stack one lane really, really hard. So say that you push the top lane really far and now you recalled. as the top laner. Well, now you can just go run bot side and just stack that bot side because there's no objective to worry about. There's nothing you're protecting, and it really doesn't matter because you already pushed the lane. So you can just use this timer to come back again, to make certain plays, to stack a lane really hard. These types of things are some things you can do. Another thing is right after first dragon, you have a similar thing where there's no real objective, there's nothing to do, and there's going to be a lot of outer turrets up because we're only going to be about 6-7 minutes into the game, so most of the outer turrets are up. So maybe you already took your tower in your lane, and now you want to really shift towards hitting one of those other outer turrets of your teammates, or rather hitting your opponent's tower. Just make sure that you do push your wave before you do this. And as the jungler, you can just, play around the turrets really hard at the end of this timer. So for a jungler especially, those two timers I spoke about right before Baron and then right after first dragon, you can get a lot of potential turrets from this, which will give you a lot of additional gold. And then Baron's, the last weird scenario is Baron spawning about 20 seconds before Elder. Oftentimes people will get overly distracted by Elder, especially if you're behind as a team and you kind of think you're probably going to lose. Then you can maybe try to sneak that Baron if you know it's spawning about 20 seconds before the Elder, and just kind of make a YOLO play because maybe the enemy will be resetting to get ready for the Elder. Maybe they'll already be warding there or whatever. And then you use your sweeper. Maybe they don't have vision of the Baron, and then you get a quick sneak. That's a very common way to potentially win the game. And then keep in mind, Elder Dragon is stronger than Baron, but Baron can prevent Elder from ending the game. So if you have Baron and the enemy have Elder, just chill, don't fight, don't die, and let your Baron minions protect, and you won't lose the game most of the time unless your teammates make some dumb plays. But the Elder Dragon's overall more preferable to end the game, because typically what you want to do is you want to use the Elder Dragon to then get the Baron, and then you have Elder and Baron, and then you end the game that way. So after you get Elder, don't just immediately try to end the game. Maybe recall, then go get the Baron, because the Elder is going to make you strong enough to get the Baron, and then end the game. That's going to be the typical sequence we're going to want to go over. Only flip objectives when behind. What I mean by flip objectives is start the objective when both junglers are alive, or when the enemy could potentially steal it from, say, like a Varus, or whatever champion's good at stealing, whether it is the enemy jungle or something like a Varus. Only flip that, so only take the 50% chance that you might hit the smite, the 50% chance that the enemy might hit the smite when you're behind, or when it's a not important objective. So like, for example, if I'm already probably going to lose the game, I might as well go try to do the Elder and magically hit the smite, because we're going to lose anyway, so if I hit that Elder, maybe I somehow win. But if I do that same thing, but I'm ahead 10,000 gold, and then I lose the smite on the Elder, now I have a potential to lose a game that should have been unlosable. So that's really important to keep in mind. And then it's okay to flip most objectives that are not that important. So like a Herald's not the most important ever, a random Dragon's not the most important ever. So you can flip those pretty much whenever, if you think you have a decent chance of getting it. And then the general priority list of objectives, Elder Dragon's going to be the strongest, Baron's going to be the second strongest, then Herald, then turrets. Yes, turrets are more valuable than a dragon. If you can get a turret, give them dragon, you are happy with that. And then dragon is the least useful of all of the major objectives that I can think of. However, if soul's on the line, this changes. So if there's a potential for soul, whether it's because you have 2 dragons, so maybe you'll get soul, or the enemy has 2 dragons, so maybe they'll get soul, well then all of a sudden the dragon is going to be more important than everything apart from an Elder or a Baron. And then overall, kills don't matter, and I have a link to a video on why kills don't matter, and so if you guys want to check that out as well, go ahead. Okay, now we're going to talk about playing from ahead. So the main things to understand from playing from ahead, it kind of goes along with the not flipping thing, right? Safe, consistent plays when you're ahead. You're already ahead, and so you take the fights that are guaranteed. You take the fights on even numbers. You take those fights that you know are going to be good. You don't randomly go for a risky play. You don't randomly try to flip an objective. You don't do these things, because if you just let the game progress normally, you're going to win the game. Now, the only difference is maybe you think you're getting really, really outscaled. If you think the enemy are just going to scale way, way better than you, as in they're going to be way better late game, then maybe you have to be a bit more aggressive early game to snowball. But if you think that your champions are roughly as strong late game, or maybe even stronger late game than the opponents, then there's no reason to overforce things. Just play around the objectives, play around those key timers. Even if one of your teammates dies randomly, it's not the end of the world. It's only the end of the world if you follow their dumb plays and then also die, one after the other, and then the enemy get Baron, that type of thing. So you're going to only want to fight when you're even numbers or have more numbers. You're not going to want to fight, a 3v4, 2v3, whatever. Even if you see an angle to maybe outplay, you'd rather just take those guaranteed plays. Again, no need to force unless getting outscaled. Defensive itemization as well is an important thing that a lot of people don't understand. So if you are ahead, you can build that, crown, you can build that stasis, that QSS, whatever, the Mob, Memorius, Guardian Angel. But if you're behind, you need to itemize a lot more aggressively. So the reason that you want to itemize defensively from ahead, generally speaking, is because your champion already has enough damage to kill, because you're already ahead of the curve of the game. And so now your main goal is to not give away your shutdown or not have a random throw or death. And of course, defensive itemization leads to a higher likelihood of you not dying. So that's why defensive itemization is going to be pretty solid. Now, keep in mind, I'm not saying to itemize purely defensively. I'm just saying you could be a bit more okay with it. So, like, you should still buy Death Cap third item, even if you're a mage and you're ahead. You should still buy these key items first. But then fourth item, you can grab the crown, or you can grab your stasis right after Death Cap, or that type of thing, whereas you might wait later, on other champions. And then don't flip objectives again when you're ahead. Now, playing from behind. Kind of going to be the inverse, right? Make a lot of risky plays. If you see a potential for an outplay, go for it, right? If you see that one angle to kill the one, really fed person, just go for it. Try to get that shutdown. And if you mess up, we were probably going to lose anyway. So the riskiness goes up and up the higher you are behind, or the further you are behind. If you're just behind a little bit, like, you don't need to make anything crazy. You could still potentially come back just from playing the game normally and the enemy make one mistake. But if you're really, really behind, and I don't know why I keep saying really, really, but if you're very behind, you can definitely make extremely risky plays, flip a random objective, try to outplay someone who's really fed, just do whatever. It honestly, what do you have to lose? Don't waste your gold on defense and utility too much. The reason for this is because you need that damage to kill. Because if you're spending 1,000 of your 7,000 gold on a stasis as a victor, well, then you're hampering your damage so much that you're never going to be able to melt through that fed Akali or that fed Lee Sin or anyone. They're never going to die. So what? You had a stasis and then you didn't die right away to the Akali. It doesn't matter, because Akali is going to kill you 2 seconds later when that stasis is gone, and you're not going to be able to possibly finish her off if your teammates do catch her out, because you're going to have no damage. Does depend, though. For example, maybe the enemy have a Fizz, they have a Zed, and you just hit 2 items on, let's say, Corki. And then you're thinking, okay, I kind of do need a stasis because I'm just constantly being targeted. And that 1,000 gold is going to give me more value than the 1,000 gold I spend on damage, because if I'm dead instantly, then that damage doesn't matter. So there are those rare cases where you still need some defensive itemization. Or, of course, some tanks have to build defensively no matter what. Like, I'm not saying to build Infinity Edge on Ornn, guys. Don't build Infinity Edge on Ornn. Please, for the love of God, don't do that. I actually had a Serpent's Fang Rakan once, so please don't do that either. Don't be a Serpent's Fang Rakan. Definitely don't do that. But yeah, the supports, the tanks, they're still going to obviously build utility and defense. I'm more speaking about a lot of the kind of damage-dealing champions. Flip as many objectives from behind as possible as well. I literally, again, nothing to lose. What do we have to lose? If there's a possibility of getting that objective, just go for it. Now, keep in mind, you don't really need to flip a random dragon. So you need to flip proper objectives. So don't flip a dragon that doesn't matter. Don't flip this random thing that doesn't matter. Don't flip anything like that. I'm saying you want to flip the objectives like a Baron or an Elder, the ones that could potentially turn your game around. Those are the ones to flip. Because one steal of an Elder, one steal of a Baron, and all of a sudden you're back in the game that you thought was unwinnable. Play around objective bounties as well. So oftentimes when you are behind, you go on the opposite side of the map of where the enemy are making a lot of plays, you play around those objective bounties. You basically want uneven numbers, which is where the trading sides kind of point comes here, where if the enemy are making a play on one side, don't go on to them and make the play against them, because they're way stronger than you. Make the play on the other side. Find some advantage. Put your eggs in one basket. Normally, you don't want your eggs in one basket, as that's like the stock advice or the investing advice that people give you. But if you're behind, if you only have $5 to your name, well, then put those $5 on the lottery and hope that somehow you become a millionaire. I'm basically telling you guys to gamble. I'm not actually promoting gambling. But you guys get the point for those who gamble. You want to flip when you have nothing to lose, because, again, maybe there's 1 in 100 games that you're going to hit that smite, you're going to win, but you're going to lose all 100 of those games anyway, so you might as well flip and get that one extra win out of your next 100 or whatever. And then, again, don't force even fights, mostly just with numbers advantage. A 3v3 fight when the enemy has 4,000 more gold than you is going to lose almost every time. But if you have a champion with 5,000 gold, and then the rest of you guys are, say the enemy are up 5,000 gold, but you have an entire another champion, well, then that gold, strength is mitigated by the fact that you have an additional person there. Additionally, play well around power spikes and game-winning objectives. So again, ignore placebo objectives, kind of like the random dragon, stuff like that, but play really hard around the Elder, the Baron, that type of thing. And then in terms of your power spikes, say that you hit death cap on Orianna at a really good time, then maybe even though your team's really behind, you try to fight on that next objective, even if it's a random dragon, because you just hit death cap and you know you now have the damage to one-shot their carry or to 1v9 a fight. So you don't always need to wait until 18-minute Elder to force a fight. You just need to force a fight around your champion strength. So for example, you know, a Lucian might be really strong on 2-3 items, but a Vayne might be really strong on 4-5 items. And so when you're playing that Vayne, you might be really trying to get to that, you know, last point in the game. But with the Lucian, even if you're a little behind, you hit that item spike and all of a sudden you're really happy to potentially still fight. And then lastly, waves and gold matter way more, especially when behind. But when ahead, sometimes you can force your fights anyway, even if, you know, you're not focusing on the waves or whatever. So when you're behind, the first thing is you're worth less gold. If you're 0 and 2, you're only worth like 150 or 200 gold. If you're 0-3, you're only worth 150. But if you're 0-0-0, then you're worth 300. If you're 3-0, you're worth 600. And so basically, the stronger you are, the more gold you're worth, and therefore the more valuable your life is in comparison to waves. But when you are really behind and you're worth only like 150 gold, then dying for a wave is pretty much an equal trade, because you get 200 gold roughly from the wave, and you only get 150 gold to the enemy from them killing you. Obviously, then they have the pressure on the map and whatever, but the point is, if you can die for a couple waves, and there's no objective that you're going to lose afterwards or whatever, then that's going to be pretty valuable, because ultimately you're just trying to get that gold closer to even until a key objective comes up. Whereas if you're really ahead, again, you're just trying to protect those gold bounties. You're just trying to play safe, play consistent. So it's kind of the difference in play style there. So that's the main thing from playing from behind. And then next we'll go into efficiency. Okay, so for those of my higher elo viewers especially, if you really want to know the difference between like a master or grandmaster level player and a sovereign like myself, this is it. Like, this is ultimately what it comes down to. It's consistency and its efficiency, and it's gold per minute. GPM means gold per minute. So the first point, think of the game in terms of math and weighing the risk versus reward and gold value of a play. So for me, a lot of people overvalue kills. I'm generally going to think about it very mathematically. So let's just give a simple example. Say that a kill is worth 300 gold. And let's say you're thinking about roaming to possibly get a kill onto, let's say, the Baron laner. So you know there's only really a realistic possibility of one kill. That's going to be 300 potential value. Let's say that we're thinking between trying to go for that kill and going for a wave, and this wave is worth 200 gold. So now I have to think to myself, is that 200 gold value that I know I'm going to get better than the 300 gold? And the way I do this is just simple math. If I think that there's a 66% chance or more of that roam working out and getting me a kill, then it's more valuable in the long run, because 0.66 times 300 is going to be 200. So basically, because of the math, I would get equal value if it was a 66% chance of working out, essentially. And so I'm going to always be thinking about it like, okay, then if that's a really high likelihood play, I'm going to go for it because it's slightly higher potential reward, but it's a lot more risky as well. So I have to weigh that risk versus reward factor. And you don't actually necessarily have to literally be doing calculations in your head in the middle of the game. Ideally you can. That's generally what I do, is I'm going to be calculating it kind of in that way. But it can also be pretty intuitive if you're not really someone who thinks that type of way. So you can also just go about it like, okay, I see a roam. Do I think that roam's going to probably work? Okay, it's probably going to work. I'll go for it. If it's probably not going to work, then I'm not going to risk it, because even though sometimes it might work out, not a big deal. And then again, if you're behind, you're more likely to want to go for that riskier play, kind of as we spoke about before. But if you're ahead, you're going to take that consistent gold value instead, especially when you're not on your power spikes. So another thing is, you're more okay with going for those random fights if you're already on your main item. So if you're already on your death cap, for example, on a Syndra, then maybe it's okay to take that fight more often. But if you haven't hit your death cap yet, you're probably going to want to take that consistent play as well. Additionally, we kind of just spoke about it, but kills make you worth more gold. Waves, turrets, and camps do not. So if you get a wave, if you get a turret, you get a camp, your gold doesn't increase. But every time you get a kill, your gold increases how much that the enemy will get from you. And so what this means is that if you end up dying after getting a lot of kills, you're giving away a lot of that value that you gained earlier in the game. But if you kill turrets, camps, waves, whatever, you're not giving anything additional back. So that's also why it's slightly more value. Even though I say, you know, a wave is worth 200 and a kill's worth 300, if you look at it in the long run, unless you're the GOAT and you never die, which, you know, I'm kind of the GOAT, so I don't die. So I don't actually have to think about this, but for those of you that do die, couldn't be me. But you have to realize that even though you're getting 300 initial gold, you're also long-term giving up some of that gold back. Additionally, the game revolves around minions, waves, around minions. I think I kind of should have put a comma here. Yeah, I don't know what I'm even... This is not English, but it's fine. But the game revolves around minion waves, and those minion waves should guide your decision making. So, okay, the problem here is that I did not mean to add the S here. Gotcha, okay. A little bit of a mistake there, but it's fine. Minion waves should be guiding your decisions, so you want to make sure that you're pushing the wave before you roam. If you already have a wave pushed, then you can roam. If the wave is pushing under your turret, probably don't roam. If the wave hasn't been pushed yet, probably don't contest that objective right away. Push the wave first. If the enemy are on, if the enemy are showing on the map, but there's no wave, they're probably not going to go that far forward. But if there's a wave there, you almost 100% know they're going to go for that wave most of the time. And so you can pretty much base all of your decisions around minion waves. And anytime you're trying to solve a problem on your own, just think to yourself, where are the waves? Where should I be on the map? What's the highest likelihood of a play occurring? These types of things. And then make the guaranteed play, then the fight, not the other way around. So the guaranteed play, again, is going to be farming first and then fighting. So this increases your gold per minute a lot because you're getting that thing that's going to be there every single time, whether it's a jungle camp, whether it's a minion wave, whatever, and then you fight. So that way you get the guarantee, then you make the risky play after of the potential fight that could go wrong. But if you make the fight and then you die in the fight, now you lose out on the guaranteed gold because if it's a jungle camp, then you're not clearing it for a longer time, so the next one won't respawn, so you're losing out on gold. Or if it's a minion wave, it's going to die to your turret or to the other minions eventually. And so that's why you typically want to go for that guaranteed play first and then fight afterwards when those guaranteed plays, like the jungle camps are gone or the minion waves are already crashed under the turret. Also, gold on some champs matters more than others. So having 1,000 gold on a Echo is way better than 1,000 gold on a Leona most of the time. So you also have to value that gold more on yourself when you're playing these types of champions like Echo, rather than, you know, Rakan. If you're playing Rakan, sure, you don't need to farm 24/7, and this is not going to apply to you as much because you're going to be doing more of the support stuff that we talked about. But if you're an Echo, if you're a Zed, you're whatever, you got to be farming as much as possible. You got to constantly keep your gold up because your champion relies on gold really, really heavily. But additionally, it also changes on the game. So if the enemy are full AD, well, all of a sudden, Malphite having gold is OP as heck. I would rather have a bunch of gold on the Malphite if they're all AD than on an Echo. But if the enemy is half AP and half AD, and they have some tank melters and whatever, well, then that gold becomes infinitely less valuable because it's just, you know, you're just going to get melted either way. So you have to understand that as well, and that kind of comes with time. And then when roaming, think about the math. You know, again, you push the wave. Okay, I got this 200 gold. Now I can go rotate for the 300 gold play, but do I really want to make the risky play to rotate immediately to give up that guarantee of 300? Only if it's going to be working out 66% or more of the time, that type of thing. Then we have team fighting and skirmishing. So just some small points on this. So skirmishing, if you don't know, is basically just like a 2v2, 3v3 type of fight in the river. Basically a small mini team fight. And then obviously team fighting is just going to be when, you know, most of both members of the teams are in a similar spot. They're all fighting each other, oftentimes at objectives, for example. So the first thing is cooldown tracking. Make sure that you pay attention to the most important spells and key abilities. So for example, if you know Malphite has ultimate, well, then you really need to keep track of that as the AD carry and wait until you see that Malphite ult to really go forward and start attacking a lot. Or if you have a stasis and they have a Zed, make sure you're keeping track of the Zed ultimate and not using your stasis unless you see Zed already use his ult on someone else, and then you know, okay, I can use my stasis for a different thing now. Also, target priority really matters in team fights. Oftentimes, for example, an assassin is going to want to target either the enchanter support or whoever is the most, you know, squishy or the best carry on the enemy team. As a tank, you're oftentimes going to want to be targeting, like hitting the tank a little bit on the enemy team and then going on to the squishy champions. These different types of things, they just kind of depend on the game, but oftentimes targeting the most valuable member of the enemy is important, especially when those people don't have a lot of defensive things. So for example, if you're a Zed and you notice that the Kai'Sa doesn't have stasis, then target the Kai'Sa. But if she has stasis, maybe target the Lulu, this type of thing. And then peel versus engage. So peel champions are often more playing to protect their own teammates. So a champion like Braum, most enchanters as well, they're kind of paying more attention to their teammates in fights to protect their teammates. But an engaged champion like Nautilus, Leona, Alistar, they're oftentimes going to be looking a lot more for these kind of fights, and so they're going to be paying more attention to the enemy carries and to the enemy and engaging on them. But make sure, you know, that you're kind of switching based on the game. So you can still play Nautilus to peel your teammates if you have a really fed carry who you really need to protect, for example. And then lastly, there's flanking. So oftentimes assassins and bruisers, top laners, stuff like that are going to want to use a flank. So usually what a flank is you're going to find a different angle into a fight as the enemy are distracted. So maybe I sit in a bush that's a little further away from the fight that will kind of pinch the enemy between me and the rest of my teammates so that I can then go onto the back line when they least expect it. You oftentimes can take sweeper to then know that they don't have vision in certain bushes and then just basically go from behind on the enemy. But yeah, that's pretty much team fighting and skirmishing. Obviously there's more to it, but these are kind of the main details. Then we have itemization. I put my full item guide. I have a 4-part item guide on here, so you can find that. In that item guide, I pretty much just talk about how all the items work. And it's slightly old, so a few items are slightly different, but they pretty much are how I say they are. But I'm not going to go over every single part of itemization. What I'm going to go over are the key elements. And then if you guys have really specific itemization questions, you can ask me in the comments. So the first thing is core items. Basically, every champion has 1 to 2 core items that just fit their champion really well, and so they need to build them nearly every time. Let's take, for example, why is my mind blanking? Like Vayne. Vayne pretty much always uses Blade of the Rune King because it just fits Vayne's whole kit really well with the 3 auto attack passive, with the attack speed, the fact that it gives lifesteal. It just gives all the stats. It gives the passive that works really well with Vayne's passive. These types of things. So usually a champion has 1 or 2 items they really, really want to build, and you just build that item pretty much first, second item every game. After that, we have situational items. These are often going to be things that specifically counter an opponent. So anti-heal counters obviously healing. So you're going to have Thornmail, which is the anti-heal tank component, which gives you armor and some health. This is going to be most valuable on a tank champion, obviously, when you need anti-heal. It's important to mention as well that every anti-heal item has a component that specifically provides grievous wounds, so you don't always have to finish the item right away. So for example, Bramble Vest is a part of Thornmail, and that gives anti-heal. Chempunk Chainsword has Executioner's Culling as the smaller component. Mortal Reminder also has Executioner's Culling, and then Morello Nomicon has Oblivion Orb. So they all have a component which gives the anti-healing passive. Usually it's going to be green in color. That's how you're kind of going to tell, except for Thornmail, which is red. So that's kind of one type of situational item, is the anti-heal. Other ones are going to be anti-attack speed and anti-crit. So Frozen Heart's going to be anti-attack speed. Anti-crit's going to be Randuin's Omen. Then there's going to be some anti-tank items. There's going to be things like Blade of the Rune King, Divine Sunderer, Riftmaker, Liandry's. These are all anti-tank items because they either give true damage or they give some type of percentage health damage. So the higher health you have, the more damage you're going to do, or the more healing you're going to get from the items. Additional items are just AP versus AD. So we're going to kind of go into the next part of situational items, which is explaining AP versus AD. So AP, ability power, AD is attack damage. So attack damage will increase your auto attack damage, but AP does not. The way that you decide what to build on a champion is through their scalings. So most champions, if you go and read their abilities, you can see, you know, it'll say plus whatever percent, and then it'll be purple if it's AP, it'll be like orange/red if it's AD. And so most champions have a majority of one scaling. So for example, Orianna, all of her abilities pretty much scale with AP. So she builds magic items, AP ability power items. Now, I don't know. Trying to think of a champion, because I'm thinking of champs and then I'm like, some of them scale with both. What's this champion like? Aatrox. I'm pretty sure Aatrox's abilities just scale with AD for the most part. So you're building AD, and he's an auto attacking champion, so he's also more likely to build AD because he auto attacks a good amount. And so champions that auto a lot or their abilities scale with AD, they're going to build AD. And then there's going to be items to counter AP and AD. So if the enemy have a lot of AP, then champions or items with magic resistance will do well against that. So stuff like Kaenic Rockern, Frozen Heart, Wit's End, Mavma Mortius, all of these items are good into AP. Into AD, you need armor. So again, things like Randuin's Omen, Frozen Heart, Thornmail, Dead Man's Plate, just other items that give armor. So those are kind of, that's an important thing to understand as well. Obviously, I know most of my viewers at this point do know that, but I will still wanted to mention that because I know some might not. Then we have flat pen versus percent pen. So this is something that's really valuable for people to understand. So flat pen, if you go and read an item's passive, it will give a flat number of armor or magic penetration that it'll give. So it'll say maybe like 10 magic pen or 15 armor pen. So for example, Youmuu's Ghostblade gives 15 armor pen. Now what this means is you go look at the armor that someone has. If they have 100 armor, it'll just subtract 15. So it'll just do 100 minus 15. That's the amount of armor you have after the penetration's applied. Now percentage pen is going to be different. The Mortal Reminder, for example, gives 33% pen. So if they have 500 armor, then you're going to remove 167 of their armor, and they're going to have 333 left. So this type of thing is the difference, where the higher the armor is, the better percentage pen is against it. Whereas the lower it is, the better flat pen is against it. Additionally, it's important to note that most AP items actually give 7% magic pen automatically. There's a few that don't, but pretty much all of them do. And so just by building magic items, you're going to get that percentage pen, but there's no item that has more than just 7% magic pen. But some items like Infinity Orb and Soul Sealer have flat pen. So that's the main thing on pen. Then the last thing for those that like the math or whatever, the percents applied before the flat is applied. So basically what makes it do more damage is applied. So let's say someone has 100 armor. I have 33% pen from Mortal Reminder, and I have 15 pen from Youmuu's. That means that it's first going to remove 33%, which means that they're going to go down to 67, or we'll say 66, same thing. So they'll go down to 66 because we'll remove roughly 33, and then they go down to 66, and then you subtract 15 now, so they're going to be at 51 armor. Whereas if it was the other way around, it would first subtract 15, which would be then 85, and then it would do 33% of 85, which I can't do off the top of my head, but that would be less. You would have more than 51 armor. So basically, that's something to keep in mind. I know I'm losing some people here, but it's fine. Next up, important to note that you need a balance of HP and resist. So health is better early game, and resistances are going to be more valuable later on in the game. The way that resistances work is if you have 100 armor or 100 magic resist, you're going to reduce 50% of the damage done to you from that type of damage. So we'll say armor, for example. It'll reduce 50% of AD. Then if you get 200, it'll reduce 66%, 375, 483, etc. That's an important thing to keep in mind as well. And then if you want to know the specific sweet spot, every 750 HP, you want 100 armor / magic resist. So that's something to keep in mind. You don't really need to do the specific math on this because it's more important to balance the passives of your items properly, but you want roughly 750 for every 100 MR and armor that you get. So usually what that looks like is you're going to build an HP item early on a tank, and then your second item is probably going to have some resist, and then your third item might be more resist, but you're going to probably have some health in those second or third items a little bit as well. But usually it's a big health item like Warmogs or Heartsteel early, most of the time, and then you build the other stuff later. And then who to itemize against, so again, we kind of spoke about that with the situational items. But generally, you also want to itemize against a stronger member of the enemy team. So even if they have 3 AP champions, if their 2 most fed members are AD, you're probably going to still build a lot of armor, even though they have a lot of AP. And then last thing to note, AP gets countered harder by magic resist than AD does by armor. So if the enemy has 4 or 5 AP, they're screwed if you itemize properly. But if they have 4 or 5 AD, they can still beat you. The reason is because AD is a consistent damage output. And so AP champions are based around spell rotations. And if you have enough magic resistance to avoid 2 full spell rotations, you just win because there's just no way they're ever going to kill you. But if you have enough armor to, say, avoid 10 seconds of autoing, well, you're still going to die the next 5 seconds later. That type of thing. A lot of AD champs also have true damage. Obviously, if they have true damage, it's going to be different. But that's the gist of it. That's the kind of what you really need to know about itemization. Generally, you can follow a pretty straightforward build path and build the same thing most of the time, as long as you make sure that you have a balance of HP and resist. You are building the correct type of damage, whether it's AP or AD. And then lastly, that you have your proper core items. That's a timer that I need to go coach someone. So I'm going to go coach someone, and then I'll be back to record the rest of this after. Okay, so now we're going to talk about champion choice. So generally, carry champions are just going to be better for solo queue. but people have a misconception between what a carry champion is. So a carry champion is not just anyone who deals a bunch of damage. However, damage dealers are pretty nice for solo queue and for carrying bad players. Like, if you're locking in a champion who just can't deal damage, then you logically have to rely on someone else dealing damage. However, champions with a lot of agency to make decisions are also really useful. So tanks can carry really well through engaging and playmaking. But generally, the best tanks for solo queue are going to be the tanks who have a bunch of damage. Like, Ornn still has a bunch of damage even though he's really tanky, whereas if you play something a bit less tankier, or a bit more tankier rather, but with worse engage, like maybe a Scion, you're probably going to struggle a bit more. So generally, champion choice is a big part of winning, but you also have to make sure you're really good on that champion. So you don't just want to play a bunch of champions over and over. You want to stick to a few amount of champions and really just focus on those. So again, main things. Ideally, you're playing a more carry-oriented champion, whether that's a champion who is really damage-focused or a champion who just has both damage and engage, or just generally who can make a lot of decisions. And then making sure that you're sticking to just a few champions to really climb. You can obviously carry on anything. It's just easier with these high-impact champions. So if you really like playing Lulu for whatever reason, I don't know why you would like playing Lulu, but maybe some people do, you can go do that if you want, and you could still potentially carry if you're really good at it. Engage can have a lot of impact, kind of as we mentioned. And then champs that can do multiple things, that's definitely the best. So a champion that can engage, can deal damage, can still build tank, can be a more squishy one-shot build, like someone who can do all those things, like Vi, for example, is going to be able to carry a lot better than a champion like Maokai, who can pretty much only be a tank. And then if you're really good at one champ or at one thing, you can choose a champion that really works well around that. So maybe you're really good at spacing and at team fighting. Then you might want to play Kai'Sa or Vayne or some hyper carry farming champion that's just really good at team fighting and just only lean into that team fighting and nothing else. That's like a good thing that you could potentially do. Or maybe your weakness is getting ganked, and so you feel like you lose track of jungle and you get ganked a lot as a top laner. Well, then you could play a champion like Warwick or Renekton who's really hard to gank, because then even though you have that weakness, it doesn't really matter, and you can just focus on your strength. Maybe your strength is laning, and so you play a really strong laner who's hard to gank, that type of thing. And then champs can also have weaknesses. Yeah, we kind of just mentioned that. And then playing the meta definitely makes life easy. You don't have to play the meta. I've climbed to the highest ranks in the game at times playing non-meta champions. However, my easiest times have been playing the meta. This season even I played Syndra Echo and I got 60% win rate challenger very quickly. I start playing something that's less meta, immediately much more difficult, right? So playing the meta is going to be a lot easier, but you have to make sure you're still really good on the meta. I'd rather have you be good on a champion that's not meta than bad on a champion that's meta. So there is still that to keep in mind. Then we have some key timers. So 5 minutes, Dragon and Herald, that's the first main objective. Obviously, second Dragon's another key objective timer. Then you got the Baron. We kind of spoke in other parts about the Baron. Then you have the Elder. The Elder is really where the game ends usually. Get that Elder, you use the Elder to get the Baron, you win the game off that. Small camps respawn after 1 minute and 50 seconds. So if you clear any camp that's not a buff, it'll take 1 minute and 50 seconds to respawn. Roughly, it's like 152 or something, but I just say 150 for simplicity. And then buffs are 230. It's really like 233, but again, 230 is the easy answer. So you can use this to track jungle. If you know that enemy jungle started on his red buff, you know that he would probably take 10 or 15 seconds to clear it. And so let's say the timer was 20 seconds when the buff spawned, and then 30 seconds he cleared it at. Well, then you know at 3 minutes he's going to be back on his red buff, probably. So then you can use that to keep track of them. Flash obviously is 150 seconds. Ultimate cooldowns in the early game are going to be like roughly 60 seconds, and in the late game are often 30 seconds or less. So keep that in mind as well when you're tracking ultimates, unless you're against an Echo who has like a 2-second ult cooldown. Not literally sarcasm, but it's really low ult cooldown, kind of broken. And then the time between objectives is really important as well. Getting use out of those time between objectives, as much gold as possible under yourself, getting out enemy key cooldowns, making sure you hit your item spikes, really valuable. So a lot of people don't utilize that time properly, and that's something to keep in mind. And then the last thing is the mindset. So this is the final thing, finally done with this video. Had a lot of fun recording it, so I hope that you guys are able to gain some value from it. But I finally just want to talk about the mindset that you should have and how you should approach learning. This is genuinely the most important slide on, you know, the whole thing. if you go through all of the other parts of my slide, you can learn a lot about the game specifically, but none of that matters if you're not trying to improve and you don't understand how to learn and how to actually get better. The first thing is, don't look for loopholes. Don't be like, oh, I just need to play this one broken champion, or, you know, what's the easiest strategy to climb? What's the best role to climb on? You can climb on any role. I've proven that to you guys. You can climb on any champion. I've not climbed on Yuumi jungle, I'll be honest with you guys, but I've climbed on plenty of different champions. I've hit rank 1 on 4 different champions. I've climbed really, really high on a bunch of different champions, whatever. So just don't try to find some type of loophole or there's no one trick. There's no one thing that's going to make you really good at Wild Rift. You have to build up a bunch of small details, get good at a lot of different things, and then over time you'll slowly improve. If you look for that one thing and you're like, oh my god, suddenly because I understand this one thing I'm going to get good, that's just not how it works. That's not how learning works. That's not how improvement works. I don't care what a random YouTuber who has a clickbait title tells you. That's just not how it works. After that, small champion pool again, 2 to 3 champions. Focus on those. Only learn the mechanics of those champions so you can understand the limits of them. You can understand how to get, how to basically do everything that champion needs. And then it gives you more time to focus on macro, because if you understand your champion really well, you can focus on decision making, you can focus on macro. But if you end up just like playing a bunch of different champions, you're going to be too focused on comboing properly that you're not going to be able to put as much brain power into the decision making aspect of the game, which is definitely the more important aspect of the game. Again, incremental improvements. Find 2 or 3 things to work on at a time. Only think about those 2 or 3 things as you go into games. Once you've built those as habits, then you go on to the next 2 or 3, and so on and so forth. Understand your champion's purpose and role in the game. So this is really, really important. I keep saying really, really. I'm kind of pissing myself off, but it's fine. So, for example, Darius, as we used earlier, really likes all-in champions, and he really likes to focus on the tanks first and then play around his resets and ults with ults because he wants to stack up, and then once he gets stacked up, he goes for the all-ins and fights. And so you're only playing around in team fights that 5-stack passive, and in lane you're also playing around your all-in potential. So understanding that means that you're not going to randomly start trying to poke people on Darius, because that's stupid. You're not going to take short trades with Darius because that's stupid. Like if you see a really easy trade angle, you take one trade, it's fine. But generally speaking, you're trying to get towards that purpose. Or if your champion's goal is to scale into the late game, you're not going to take a bunch of fights level 1. You're going to wait until you hit your 2-item, your 3-item power spike. But if your champion's strongest point in the entire game, like Jace or Riven, for example, is level 1, well then you're going to level 1 all in every single champion until you know every single champion in Wild Rift. Which one can I all in? Which one can I not? And then once you understand that about your champion, now you know perfectly which champions you can and can't go on, and then you're going to realize at some point, oh, I all-into Jace last game and I killed him, but I all-into him this game and I didn't kill him. Why is that? And then you're going to realize, oh, it's probably because he had bone plating one time, he didn't have bone plating the other time, or he had phase rush and phase rush out-kited me, or he had first strike and that gave me more debt. The point is, you're going to have to build all of these specific habits, and the best way to do that is if you really focus on your champion's purpose and you really, really hard go into that purpose, and then as you realize things change from, again, maybe an all-in that you thought worked before and now doesn't work, you look for those small different details, and those small different details that you work on, you slowly get better at 1 or 2, because like maybe now, you've improved on most of the hard things, but now you go into the small things like, oh, I didn't check the rune cooldowns properly, and that's why I died here. And so you slowly get more and more complicated, more and more like detailed in your analysis of your gameplay and what you're trying to improve on. So like initially, for a lot of you, you're probably just going to want to go to some of the basics that I mentioned, like wave management, and improve your wave management, which is one of the biggest aspects of the game. Gold per minute efficiency, that's going to be another thing. But then later, like I said, once you feel like you've improved on those things, you go into the smaller aspects. After that, find specific points to improve on and build habits. We kind of already talked about that, so we're going to go over that point. Next thing is individual games don't matter. And don't get me wrong, I get tilted. You could watch my stream for the last 5 days. I've had a lot of tilting games. And I am by no means, perfect, right? Obviously, I get tilted too. But the general thing that you need to understand is that individual games don't matter. And so even if you lose one game, even if it's because your teammates threw, they trolled, whatever, the worst thing you can do is let that bleed into your next game. And again, I say this as someone who literally has been letting the games bleed into their, future games recently. Like, I made this mistake. I will continue to make this mistake, but in the overall, I often am pretty good about this. And so if you feel like you're letting your games affect your next games, just take a break. Like, just don't play for an hour, don't play for 2, don't play for a day, whatever. And then once you feel like you have a clear mindset, go back in. I really like the rule of not playing after more than 2 losses in a row. So if you lose 2 losses in a row, then just take a break, come back 10 minutes later. For me, obviously I'm kind of different because I'm a streamer, and so I will stream when I'm on a 5-game loss streak, but trust me, I don't recommend that. It's not fun. But yeah, just generally individual games don't matter. Focus on long-term improvement and focus on improving your win rate, not on improving, one specific game or winning one specific game. After that, compare decision making to top players. So a good way to find what to improve on is just to simply watch back a really high elo player's game. Maybe, watch me if you think I'm good. If you think I'm good, thank you. I appreciate that. That's really nice of you. If you think I suck, that's fine. Then go look up Wild Rift China top 1, whatever champion it is you play. Go watch that person play the game. And then when you're watching them, pause before they make key decisions and then think to yourself what you would have done. So maybe 5 seconds before an objective, think about what you would do in this fight, and then watch how they play the fight. See how it's different. Compare that, and then when it differs from what you would have done, write down the specific differences, and then that's what you're going to try to improve on next. So that's a good way to find what you want to improve on. Then blaming the system doesn't do anything. So a lot of people, they complain a lot about matchmaking. It's definitely annoying. Like, I will acknowledge first, matchmaking is very fucking like suboptimal. Generally speaking, this game, it's frustrating, right? You have the whole, like, you have a higher win rate, and then you're going to get worse teammates, and it sucks. It's annoying. Trust me, as someone who has high win rate, who's high rank, I understand because I do experience the negatives of the system. However, blaming the system for why you lose an individual game, that's whatever. Blaming the system for why you're the rank you are shows a big lack of intelligence. Like, frankly, if you think that the system is the reason that you are whatever rank you are, you just aren't able to reason. Like, you have no ability to reason logically. I don't know. The point is, over the long run, all of the best players in Wild Rift are all able to climb if they play enough games, if they're good enough at the game, all these types of things. So even if hypothetically the system was awful and the system was bringing you down and trying to make you lose purposefully, that doesn't matter because you can't control it. And so you might as well try to figure out what you can control to beat the system. So maybe that's, okay, it's fine. The system's really going to suck, so I'm going to change the way I play. So I play really selfish so I can carry even really bad games. Or I'm going to switch my champion, or I'm going to switch something. But the point is, focus on what you can change, what you can control, not on these external factors. Whether they're true or not, it literally doesn't matter. If I'm wrong and the system is secretly against you and it hates you, and Riot Games, maybe, I don't know, like, they just absolutely hate you, they want you to lose every game, there's still nothing you can do about that because Riot Games owns the game, right? So it doesn't matter. The point is, like, even if it is, as you guys will say. So that's my rant about why blaming the system doesn't make any sense. Whether or not it's true, it really doesn't matter. But also, like, obviously all of the top players that we see have climbed consistently. So also, obviously, like, they're able to climb every season. I'm able to climb every season. So how would the system be the problem? Then mute chat and get mad at your team after the game. So just mute the chat during the game. Turn on party chat so you don't have to read what they say. And then it's fine to get mad at your team, but it's hard to get mad at them during the game if you want to win. Because if you get mad at them during the game, then you're going to start thinking about what your teammates are doing wrong, when you should be thinking about what you can do to win the game from this, point. So it just doesn't make sense to get mad at a team during, because you're going to distract yourself. You're not going to be very focused. If you get mad at your team after the game, that doesn't matter. It's like, put the brain power after the game into getting mad at your team all you want. Flame them all you want, because it doesn't matter. The game's over. Nothing you can do about it. You might as well just get that frustration out before you go into the next game. Just generally, to kind of round it all off, you just need to take accountability for what you can control. Try to be, don't blame yourself to an insane extent, but just focus on yourself. You can only change your gameplay. You can only really work on what you can control. You can't stop your teammates from sucking, because they just do suck. It's just the reality. And keep in mind, if you watch my stream for the last 5 days, high level players tilt. Again, I'm a player who's hit top 10 in the server 3 seasons in a row, and I've lost for 5 straight days. I've not had a single day where I win more games than I lose. I've been very frustrated and annoyed. It happens with everyone. It's hard not to blame your teammates. I've blamed my teammates during this time because I'm tilted and annoyed, and it happens. And even when that happens, I go in the shower after I'm done streaming. I think about what I could have done better, and then I go and I review my games for often multiple hours to try to figure out what I could do better. And so even if during the game you're getting mad at your team, you're blaming them because it's hard to control your emotions, just make sure that you're trying to be level-headed about it a couple hours after, a day after, and then you start to learn from your mistakes. Ultimately, that's what's important. It doesn't actually matter whether or not during the game you're blaming your team, even though it's not ideal. It just matters that in the long term, you're realizing that you are able to change yourself, improve at the game. Basically that. So that's overall everything that I have for this video. I think it's like a roughly 2-hour video. Just wanted to give you guys all the fundamentals of Wild Rift. Everything that you really need to improve is in this video. If you want to reach Sovereign, you want to reach whatever rank it is, if you genuinely understand and implement all of the things that I said in here, and you utilize this mindset, I don't see why within, say, 3 to 6 months, you shouldn't be able to hit whatever your new peak rank would be. As long as you're putting time into the game, you're playing a decent amount, and you're just trying to improve. So that's basically it. I do coaching for $15 an hour, so if you guys are interested in that, just DM me on Discord, Talon1169, or through the link in the description to my Discord server. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.